DNA. Test on a 3,000-year-old mummy reveals a terrifying secret. Hello everyone, it's great to have you back on Ancient History, a place where every story can make us rethink everything we once believed to be true. Now think about this. Every day we walk across the ground beneath our feet, assuming it's nothing more than ordinary soil and stone. But what if, beneath that thin layer of dust, something far more extraordinary is hidden? You might assume it's just the remains of the past, long erased by time, but the truth is completely different. Deep underground, there isn't just sand and rock, there's an entire buried world. Ancient cities that once thrived with life, skeletal remains carrying secrets yet to be uncovered, and mysterious mummies that could reshape the way we understand history. There are even massive treasures that have lain untouched for thousands of years. Just hearing that is enough to spark curiosity, isn't it? What's truly fascinating is that every archaeological discovery is far more than simply digging something up. Behind each find lies a thrilling story, mysteries that even scientists continue to debate, and sometimes truths that are stranger than legend itself. Some discoveries, once revealed, force us to ask an unsettling question. Have we ever truly understood the past correctly? And in today's video, we're about to embark on a special journey. A journey where secrets buried for thousands of years are slowly brought to light. Not just to explore, but to realize that history is far from dead. It's still waiting to be told, in ways you could never imagine. So, are you ready to dig beneath the surface of time and uncover what has never been revealed before? If you are, then let's begin with our very first discovery right now. Frankenstein mummies of Scotland. 6 humans combined into one bizarre entity. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but this story actually began quite normally until it gradually turned disturbing in a way no one expected. Back in 2001, on the Hebrides Islands of Scotland, a group of archaeologists was excavating beneath the stone floor of an ancient house. At first, everyone assumed it was just another routine dig. Perhaps they would uncover a few ancient skeletons, document them, and move on. But no. What they discovered sent chills through the entire scientific community. Beneath the floor where they were digging, they uncovered 2 mummies, one male and one female, curled tightly in a fetal position, as if they were trying to return to the very beginning of life. At first glance, this seemed fairly typical for an archaeological find, but the deeper researchers from the University of Manchester looked, the more they realized something was seriously wrong. These bodies had not been preserved in any conventional way. Instead, they had been submerged in a peat bog for hundreds of years. The bog environment, low in oxygen and rich in acid, had effectively acted as a natural embalming chamber, preserving soft tissue in an unusual way. Up to this point, you might think, that makes sense, but this is where things take a darker turn. During a detailed examination, Professor Terry Brown discovered something highly unusual. The female mummy's jawbone did not match her skull. In simple terms, it was like taking a puzzle piece that clearly doesn't belong and forcing it into place. And disturbingly, this mismatch didn't occur in just one area. As DNA testing continued, the truth slowly emerged, one that left everyone unsettled. The body parts of the female mummy, her jaw, skull, arms, and legs, did not belong to the same individual. In fact, they weren't even biologically related to each other. In other words, this body had been assembled from multiple different people. And what about the male mummy? It was no better. The head and neck showed clear signs of being pieced together. A report published in the Journal of Archaeological Science noted that the spine displayed signs of arthritis in the neck region. Yet strangely, those signs completely disappeared in the lower vertebrae, as if the upper and lower halves did not belong to the same body. Even more unsettling, the lower jaw contained a full set of teeth, while the upper jaw had none. A small detail, but enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. After all the analyses, the research team reached a shocking conclusion. These 2 mummies had been constructed from at least 6 different individuals. Even more astonishing, the male mummy appeared to be assembled from bodies that had lived hundreds of years apart, then combined sometime between 1310 and 1130 BC. At this point, you're probably wondering, why would ancient people do such a thing? Was this simply a way to repair damaged bodies during the mummification process? Professor Terry Brown suggested that perhaps a missing head had been replaced with one from another body. But another theory, proposed by Professor Mike Parker Pearson, is even more bizarre. These remains may have been deliberately combined for ritual purposes, representing an entire community, as if multiple individuals had been merged into one. Because of its eerie nature, major outlets like National Geographic and Live Science gave this discovery a haunting name: the Frankenstein mummies, a reference to the creature in Frankenstein assembled from different human parts. And to this day, the mystery remains unsolved. As of 2013, the Hebrides Islands are still the only location in the United Kingdom where prehistoric mummies have been discovered. A finding that not only forced scientists to rethink everything they knew about mummification in Scotland, but also leaves us with a haunting question. What were ancient people truly thinking when they created one human from many? Do you have an answer? If so, don't hesitate to share your thoughts below and join the discussion. The mysterious elixir in a Western Han tomb, China. People often say that beneath every inch of earth lies an untold story, and sometimes all it takes is an unexpected collapse for thousands of years of history to rise before our eyes. And that's exactly what happened. In October 2018, at an active construction site in Luoyang, China, what seemed like an ordinary accident became a doorway into the past. The foundation of the site suddenly gave way, creating a sinkhole about 6.6 feet deep, swallowing two unfortunate workers. Thankfully, they were quickly rescued without serious harm. But that very hole marked the beginning of a far greater mystery. It turned out to be the top of an ancient tomb that had lain undisturbed for over 2,000 years. When archaeologists arrived and secured the site, they realized this was no ordinary burial. It was a large brick tomb dating back to the Western Han Dynasty, a time when wooden graves were being replaced with more durable brick structures like this one. The tomb resembled an underground mansion, measuring about 49 feet long and 46 feet wide, covering roughly 2,260 square feet. Inside, it was divided into 6 distinct sections, including the entrance passage, the main burial chamber, side rooms, corridors, and burial pits. The main chamber alone was impressive, measuring 13.5 feet long, 9.2 feet wide, and 4.3 feet high, constructed with bricks weighing a total of 16 tons. What made this discovery even more remarkable was the complete absence of tomb raiding. To ensure absolute safety for the artifacts, experts made an unprecedented decision. They relocated the entire main chamber to a laboratory at the Luoyang Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology. A large truck was brought in, steel cables were tightly secured, and cameras were even mounted on the tomb to monitor every movement. The operation drew millions of online viewers, as if the entire world was holding its breath to see what secrets lay within. When the past was finally opened, more than 100 burial objects were revealed. Bronze lamps, mirrors, jars, bowls, earrings, all exquisitely crafted and clearly belonging to someone of noble status. Some items were so unique that even seasoned archaeologists paused in awe, such as a goose-shaped lamp and intricately carved cups. Clearly, the tomb's owner was no ordinary person, but the most chilling discovery was something else entirely. A heavily corroded bronze container, seemingly insignificant, was found to hold about 118 fluid ounces of liquid. At first, it was thought to be ancient wine, perhaps a millennium elixir meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. But ordinary wine would have evaporated long ago, making that theory unlikely. So what exactly was this mysterious liquid? To find out, the Luoyang Institute collaborated with experts from the University of Science and Technology Beijing to analyze it. The results stunned everyone. The liquid was not wine, it was a mixture of potassium nitrate and alum, a formula recorded in ancient texts on alchemy. In other words, it was an elixir of immortality, something countless nobles in ancient times desperately sought. It sounds magical, but the truth is far more brutal. Further analysis confirmed that this so-called elixir didn't extend life at all. It could actually cause early death due to poisoning. What was once believed to be the key to eternal life turned out to be the fastest path to the grave. In the end, this 2,000-year-old tomb tells more than just the story of a wealthy noble. It reflects a deeply human obsession, the desire to live forever. Now think about it. If immortality truly existed, would history look the same as it does today? I'm certain it wouldn't. And if that were the case, history itself would have to be rewritten entirely. 200 elixir pills found in an 1,800-year-old tomb in China. You know, in East Asia, both in the past and even today, burial traditions have never been taken lightly. People believe that if the deceased are properly laid to rest, their descendants in the living world will enjoy peace and prosperity. That's why, from emperors to ordinary citizens, everyone put great care into their final resting place. But have you ever wondered, if a tomb goes against all of those traditions, what kind of story might lie behind it? If not, let's travel back to the 1960s to Xiangshan on the outskirts of Nanjing, China. At that time, archaeologists uncovered a remarkably large joint burial tomb dating back to the Eastern Jin Dynasty, more than 1,600 years ago. At first glance, this might not seem unusual, since joint burials, where a husband and wife are buried together, were quite common. However, the deeper they excavated, the more they realized that this tomb was different from any they had encountered before. Inside, archaeologists discovered numerous valuable burial items: gold-plated porcelain plates, gold and silver jewelry, and various objects that clearly reflected the status of the noble class. But what caught their attention the most was not the treasure. It was over 200 pills placed right beside the tomb's occupant. Sounds mysterious already, doesn't it? Fortunately, although the body had decomposed over time, the tombstone inscription remained intact. It revealed that the person buried there was a high-ranking official from the Eastern Jin Dynasty named Wang Bin, the uncle of Wang Xiji, the legendary sage of calligraphy in Chinese history. However, upon examining the remains, experts made a surprising discovery. The person buried alongside Wang Bin was not his wife, but his daughter, Wang Danhu. According to historical records, Wang Danhu was born in the year 302 and died in 360 at the age of 58. That may not sound unusual at first, but in that era, when women typically married as early as 16 or 17, it was extremely rare for a noblewoman of her status to remain unmarried. Think about it. A prestigious family like the Wangs would have had no shortage of suitors. Yet in the end, she was buried in her family's tomb instead of being laid to rest with a husband, as tradition dictated. This suggests only one thing: she lived her entire life without marrying. But why? The answer may lie in those 200 pills. Experts identified them as wuxi powder, a type of elixir that was extremely popular during the Wei and Jin periods. Originally, it was a medicinal formula created by the famous physician Zhang Zhongjing to treat illnesses. But over time, the nobility came to believe that it could extend life, or even grant immortality. After taking it, users often experienced strange physical symptoms, but instead of questioning the substance, they assumed that they had not taken it correctly, and consumed even more. This trend continued into the Eastern Jin Dynasty, and Wang Danhu's father, Wang Bin, was known to strongly believe in alchemy, so it's not hard to imagine that he directly influenced his daughter. But the truth is far more brutal. Modern science has proven that wuxi powder is no miracle elixir. Its main ingredient is mercury sulfide, a highly toxic substance. Long-term use can damage the nervous system and severely affect reproductive health. In high doses, it can even cause sudden death due to heavy metal poisoning. So the question is, was Wang Danhu's death connected to these pills? No one can say for certain, since her remains are no longer intact for testing. But the presence of over 200 elixir pills placed inside her coffin says a lot. A deep, almost obsessive belief in the promise of immortality. In the end, it may have been that very desire to live forever that led her to forego marriage, choosing instead to follow a path she believed in, only to be left with an unfinished dream that has lingered for more than 1,600 years. So if you had lived in that era, do you think you would have been rational enough to resist being drawn into such dreams of immortality? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Treasure worth $23.7 billion, hidden inside a mysterious cave. What would you think if I told you that some treasures aren't buried beneath the ocean floor or hidden under vast deserts, but instead lie concealed deep within mountains, waiting for a random moment to reveal themselves? It sounds unbelievable, almost like a fantasy, doesn't it? And yet, this is a completely true story. It all happened in March 1979 in Tianshan Town, Gaoyu City, Jiangsu Province, China. At that time, a group of stone quarry workers were working on Shenju Mountain, about 28 miles north of the ancient city of Yangzhou. Everything was proceeding as usual, until they encountered an unusually hard layer of rock that was nearly impossible to break using manual methods. With no other option, they decided to use explosives to speed up the process, but that very decision accidentally led to one of the most shocking archaeological discoveries of its time. After a thunderous explosion, the rock shattered, revealing a vast, strange space behind it. One glance was enough to realize this wasn't a natural cave. Instead, it was something far more unusual. A mysterious cave, in the truest sense, appearing right before their eyes. The incident was quickly reported to authorities, and the site was immediately sealed off. Archaeologists were dispatched, and after a short period of study, they reached a conclusion that stunned everyone. The so-called cave was actually an ancient tomb dating back to the Western Han Dynasty. Although the explosion had caused significant damage, what remained was still enough for experts to identify the tomb's owner. Based on excavated artifacts and historical records, they determined it to be the resting place of Liu Shu, the king of Guangling, the fifth son of Emperor Wu of Han, a powerful figure in Chinese history. Inside the tomb, archaeologists discovered numerous artifacts from that era, many considered priceless national treasures. These included jade fragments, bronze items, lacquerware, ceramics, wooden servant figurines, and many other objects, all bearing the unmistakable marks of royal craftsmanship. Remarkably, more than half of these artifacts were exceptionally well preserved. Their intricate design, rarity, and historical value made them nearly impossible to price in monetary terms. However, the true treasure lay in the structure of the tomb itself. Experts later discovered that the entire wooden interior was constructed from golden thread Nanyue wood, one of the rarest and most valuable types of wood found only in China. In total, 856 pieces of this precious timber were assembled using an incredibly sophisticated technique. Almost no nails were used, yet the structure remained solid for thousands of years. Just how special is this wood? It emits a natural fragrance, and its grain shimmers like golden silk when exposed to light. The older the tree, the more valuable it becomes, and the highest grade, known as sinking golden thread Nanyue, is considered virtually priceless. In ancient times, only royalty could afford to use this wood for building palaces or crafting coffins. There are even reports that in 2013, just a small piece of golden thread Nanyue was listed for sale at around 20 million yuan, approximately 2.75 million US dollars. Now imagine multiplying that value across all 856 pieces used in this tomb. Yes, the estimated total value reaches an astonishing 171.2 billion yuan, or roughly 23.7 billion US dollars. A number so massive that even in today's world, it's enough to leave anyone speechless. Following the discovery, the entire tomb complex was carefully restored and later transformed into the Guangling King's Tomb Museum of the Han Dynasty, now open to the public. It has also been officially recognized as a National Cultural Heritage Site, a vivid testament to the wealth and power of ancient royalty. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of the story isn't the treasure itself, it's how it was discovered. Just one accidental explosion and a 2,000-year-old legacy was brought back into the light. Which makes you wonder, beneath our very feet, there may still be countless secrets humanity has yet to uncover. The only question is, will we ever be lucky enough to stumble upon them? The Quicksand tomb that claimed 30 grave robbers. Did you know that in ancient China, there was a saying that sounds almost like a joke at first, but becomes chilling the more you think about it? Of 10 Han Dynasty tombs, 9 have been looted. This saying reveals a harsh truth. Thousands of years ago, the battle between the living and the dead never truly ended. On one side were those determined to protect the final resting places of the deceased. On the other were those willing to do anything to break in and seize the treasures buried deep underground. For a long time, many people assumed that those who received lavish burials in ancient China, emperors, nobles, and the wealthy, simply lay to rest and left everything behind, just as we often think today. That death marks the end of all worldly possessions. But that wasn't the case at all. For the ancient Chinese, especially royalty and the elite, preparations for death were often even more meticulous than for life itself. Their tombs were built to be incredibly secure, filled with burial goods, gold, silver, jade, and priceless artifacts. But precisely because of this, these tombs became irresistible targets for grave robbers. And so, a true battle of wits began. Some tombs were so dangerous that they discouraged intruders from the very start. For example, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is believed to contain massive amounts of mercury, enough to turn the entire site into a deadly zone. Or the famous Mawangdui Han tombs, where chemical changes over time created highly flammable gases. A single spark could ignite an inferno, instantly destroying anyone who dared to enter. Other tombs took a more direct approach to defense. Take, for instance, the tomb of a Zhao official from the state of Jin during the spring and autumn period in Taiyuan. Each corner of the tomb was weighted down with stones of about 110 pounds, while gravel surrounded the coffin. Even at a glance, it was clear that disturbing the site would be extremely dangerous. Dig just a little too far, and the stones could collapse, burying intruders alive, as if the ancient builders were saying, "Try it if you dare." But even these defenses pale in comparison to a tomb discovered in the 1990s in Baoji City, Shanxi Province, China. At the time, a local farmer was digging in his yard to build a pigsty when he encountered unusually large stones. Sensing something was wrong, he reported it to the local cultural heritage authorities. Soon after, archaeologists were dispatched to investigate the site. During excavation, workers uncovered not only fine sand, but also multiple mutilated human skeletons. At first, experts believed these remains might belong to sacrificial burials. But as more evidence emerged, archaeologists realized the truth. This was a uniquely deadly tomb filled with lethal traps. Those skeletons belonged to grave robbers who had entered but never made it out. This ancient tomb was a classic example of a quicksand tomb. The sand inside had been specially prepared, heated and dried before being placed in corridors and around the burial chambers. In some areas, there were just a few tons of sand. In others, tens or even hundreds of tons. This sand was incredibly fine and highly mobile. When grave robbers entered, they would first encounter layers of it. The moment they tried to dig even a small amount away, the sand would instantly flow back, filling the gap. No matter how much they dug, it would never be enough. Dig a little, the sand pours back in. Dig more, it fills again. There is no stopping point, no escape. Worse still, the holes dug by robbers were often wide, making it even easier for the sand to collapse inward. Just one small mistake, and both the person and the pit would be swallowed whole. In other words, once you stepped inside, there was only one outcome: becoming an unwilling burial offering. After understanding this mechanism, the archaeological team had to rely on modern machinery to continue excavation. In the end, they discovered 30 skeletons buried within the sand, all of them individuals who had once greedily ventured into a place that was never meant for them. But what's even more astonishing is this: not a single artifact was missing. Thousands of treasures, jade, bronze, and more, remained completely intact, as if the tomb had never been touched for thousands of years. This truly shows how formidable the intelligence of ancient people could be. They didn't just build tombs for burial, they transformed them into deadly fortresses. However, tombs using this quicksand design gradually disappeared after the Eastern Han Dynasty, as if the secret itself had been buried by time. Which is why people say, some treasures are not meant to be taken, and some doors, once you step through them, can never be walked back out of. 7 blood-red skeletons in a 2,500-year-old tomb at the Jinsha site, China. Some archaeological discoveries capture only the attention of scientists, while others send shockwaves through the public. The Jinsha site, located in Chengdu, Sichuan Province, China, is one of those rare places. Alongside Sangxingdui, it is considered one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 21st century, revealing a once thriving civilization that flourished along the upper Yangtze River more than 3,000 years ago. What's fascinating is that it wasn't until 2016 that another secret began to emerge. In the western area of the Jinsha Palace complex, dating back to the Shangzhou period, archaeologists began excavations and uncovered a cluster of ancient tombs that left everyone astonished. Within an area of about 8,600 square feet, they discovered numerous artifacts, including bronze items, pottery, stone tools, and most notably, 7 tombs dating back to the Warring States period. At first glance, this might not seem unusual, but the deeper they dug, the stranger things became. These tombs varied in type: single burials, joint burials, and even graves containing 3 individuals. However, the most striking feature was 2 unusually small coffins, barely large enough for a single person. When experts carefully opened them, the skeletons inside were revealed and immediately left everyone stunned. Because the bones were red, not faintly tinted, not slightly discolored, but a deep, vivid red like blood, even after more than 2,500 years. So why were they red? After thorough analysis, scientists determined that the color came from a thick layer of cinnabar covering the bodies. This substance didn't just stain the bones, it also turned the surrounding soil red. In fact, the use of cinnabar as a pigment in ancient times wasn't unusual, as it retains its color extremely well. However, using it to coat human bodies during burial, this was the first time such a practice had ever been recorded. And that wasn't all. Within this tomb cluster, archaeologists also found evidence of human sacrifice, where living individuals were buried alongside the dead. What's even more striking is that these sacrificial victims were also covered in cinnabar, just like the tomb's primary occupant. Why would they do this? The answer lies in ancient beliefs. Red was seen as the color of blood, and blood symbolized life. Because cinnabar is red, people believed that coating a body with it could give the deceased a chance at rebirth, or at the very least, help sustain their existence in the afterlife. In other words, it was a way of holding on to life, even if only through belief. Additionally, archaeologists discovered a large number of animal bones, such as deer, around the tombs. These animals typically lived in wetland environments, and the way they were buried closely matched sacrificial rituals previously identified at the Jinsha site. This led experts to a compelling hypothesis. Could the people of the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods have been continuing the traditions of the ancient Jinsha civilization? But there's more. Another surprising detail was the height of the skeletons. In the past, it was commonly believed that the ancient Shu people were relatively small in stature. However, many of the skeletons found here were significantly taller, some reaching up to 5 feet 11 inches. This suggests that ancient people may not have been as short as we once thought. Factors such as living conditions, nutrition, or other unknown elements may have played a role. Experts also estimate that the average age of the individuals buried here was around 50 years old, a remarkably high number for a time more than 2 millennia ago. So from just a single burial site, countless questions arise about beliefs, rituals, people, and an entire civilization that once existed. Think about it, a skeleton that remains blood red after 2,500 years. Is it merely a chemical reaction, or does it carry a deeper message? One that ancient people intended to leave behind for future generations, and for those who are passionate about uncovering the mysteries of the past. 2,000-year-old solid gold treasure and a life-or-death standoff with grave robbers in the tomb of the Lord of Sipán. It's not only the tombs of Chinese emperors that are filled with gold and priceless treasures. Around the world, there are burial sites so extraordinary they leave people truly stunned. The story of the tomb of the Lord of Sipán in Peru is one such discovery. Dramatic like a movie, yet revealing an entire civilization once lost to history. Everything began in 1987, when a series of rare artifacts suddenly appeared on the black market, traced back to Peru. What made this unusual was that these items did not belong to the well-known Inca civilization. This immediately raised suspicion for Dr. Walter Alva, a highly perceptive archaeologist. He was certain that somewhere, an important site had just been looted. Without hesitation, he and his team set out for Peru, following every possible lead. After a long search, they finally identified a suspicious location near Chiclayo, in a valley in the north. But when they arrived, the scene was alarming. The tomb had already been opened. Inside, everything was in disarray. Many artifacts were missing, and broken pieces were scattered everywhere. Clearly, grave robbers had gotten there first. If they had arrived just a little later, the entire treasure might have vanished without a trace. This was no small burial site. It consisted of dozens of chambers of various sizes, each filled with valuable grave goods. What made this even more remarkable is that in Peru, many archaeological sites had already been looted since the Spanish colonial period. Combined with ongoing grave robbing, the fact that so many artifacts remained was extremely rare. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Dr. Alva made a bold decision. He and his team would guard the tomb themselves, not for just a day or two, but for many days in a row, under constant threat. Local villagers, accustomed to looting artifacts, gathered to intimidate them, even hurling insults and threats, warning that they would kill him if he didn't leave. But Alva's team stood their ground. Armed for self-defense, they were determined to protect the site until authorities arrived. Eventually, Peru's cultural heritage authorities stepped in, and the official excavation began. The results confirmed their suspicions. This was indeed the tomb of the Lord of Sipán, dating back around 2,000 years, belonging to the ancient Moche civilization, a civilization that flourished between 100 and 700 AD, long before the rise of the Inca. When the main burial chamber was finally opened, everyone held their breath. At the center lay the skeleton of the ruler. In his hand, he held a small, solid, gold scepter-like tool, weighing about 1.1 pounds. His head and chest were covered with a gold mask and countless intricate ornaments. Turquoise inlaid gold pieces, gold and silver necklaces, all layered together to form a dazzling protective display. In total, the body was adorned with 25 layers of precious jewelry. But that wasn't all. Surrounding the coffin were dozens of skeletons, guards and servants, both male and female. Their remains were also covered with gold and silver ornaments. It was a scene both magnificent and deeply chilling. Experts concluded that this discovery was not just about uncovering a tomb, it awakened an entire glorious chapter of ancient Peru. In fact, the splendor of the Sipán tomb has often been compared to that of Qin Shi Huang in the East. Today, more than 660 artifacts from this tomb are displayed at the Royal Tombs of Sipán Museum, serving as vivid evidence of the power and wealth of a once-forgotten civilization. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of the story lies behind the discovery itself. If Dr. Alva hadn't acted in time, would we ever have known about this ancient ruler? It makes you realize some treasures don't just lie buried beneath the earth, they exist on the fragile boundary between human greed and the preservation of history. The skeletons of a man and woman in a treasure-filled ancient tomb. Some tombs, once opened, simply reveal the past, but others, the moment the coffin is lifted, force history itself to be rewritten. Grave 38, an ancient burial at La Almaloya, is exactly that kind of discovery, leaving archaeologists in awe. The story began when researchers from the Autonomous University of Barcelona conducted excavations in the Pliego area of Murcia. At first, they believed it was just another site from the El Argar civilization, a culture that existed nearly 3,700 years ago. But as the soil was carefully removed, what lay beneath far exceeded all expectations. When the coffin was opened, two skeletons appeared, one male, one female, lying side by side. But what truly stunned everyone wasn't the remains themselves. It was what surrounded them. Around the bodies were about 30 finely crafted artifacts, most made of silver, a metal that was extremely rare and valuable at the time. Just imagine, in an era when metal itself was a luxury, owning that many silver objects would have been almost unimaginable, let alone being buried with them. Further analysis revealed that the man died at around 35 to 40 years old, while the woman was younger, approximately 25 to 30. Were they a couple? Possibly, but their true relationship remains a mystery. Then came a detail that began to change everything. On the woman's head was a silver crown. This was not an ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of power. Immediately, archaeologists began to question whether this woman held a special role within El Argar society. Looking at how the burial goods were arranged, the answer seemed to point in a very clear direction. Most of the valuable artifacts were concentrated around the woman. This suggests that although she was buried alongside a man, her status may have been even higher. That might sound surprising, right? For a long time, when we think of ancient civilizations, we tend to assume that power was held by men. But this tomb tells a completely different story. Experts believe that this woman may have been a powerful figure, possibly even a ruler, or a kind of queen of the El Argar society. If confirmed, this would be extremely important evidence showing that women once held central roles in an ancient civilization, something history has largely overlooked. As researchers continue their analysis, they are beginning to understand that these silver objects were not merely decorative. They were symbols of authority, status, and influence. Placing them in the tomb was not just for display. It was a way to assert the identity and power of the deceased, even in the afterlife. At present, studies are still ongoing to better understand the identity of this woman. But even now, Grave 38 has already become one of the most significant discoveries related to the El Argar civilization. As you can see, from just 2 skeletons and a few dozen artifacts, we can reshape our entire understanding of a civilization. Isn't that fascinating? The gold-covered beauty skeleton in a Siberian king's tomb. You know, the ancient world has always been filled with mysteries and fascination in its own unique way. And just like that, there are tombs that, when uncovered, don't just reveal wealth. They expose rituals so chilling that they send shivers down the spine of modern observers. The story of an ancient king's tomb in Siberia is one such example, a place where gold, power, and death intertwine in ways no one could have expected. When archaeologists began excavating this burial site, they quickly realized it was no ordinary tomb. From the very first layers of soil, numerous gold ornaments began to appear, gleaming as if time itself had never touched them. But what drew the most attention lay at the very center of the tomb. There was the skeleton of a young woman, almost entirely covered in gold. And consider this, around 2,600 years ago, for a woman to be buried with such an immense amount of gold, her status must have been anything but ordinary. Experts believe she may have been the wife or a consort of the king buried there. But the story doesn't end with luxury. Upon closer analysis, researchers discovered that the male skeleton, the primary occupant of the tomb, showed signs of prostate cancer. This is an extremely rare finding in archaeology, as identifying diseases in ancient bones is not always possible. And what about the woman? To this day, the cause of her death remains a mystery. There are no clear signs indicating that she died from illness. Because of this, researchers have proposed a chilling hypothesis. She may have been poisoned and buried alongside the king. That alone is unsettling, but it doesn't stop there. As the excavation expanded, archaeologists uncovered something even more disturbing. Surrounding the main tomb was an entire entourage of remains. A total of 35 skeletons, including 16 men, 13 women, 5 children, and 1 individual of unidentified sex. All of them were buried together, as if they had no say in their own fate. And it wasn't just humans. There were also 14 horses buried alongside them. Think about that for a moment. A burial ritual involving the sacrifice of both people and animals. How brutal must it have been? Experts believe that this entire entourage may have been killed to accompany and serve the king in the afterlife. This was not an unfamiliar practice in many ancient cultures, but each time it is discovered, it leaves a haunting impression. What's particularly striking is that the findings in this tomb closely match the accounts of Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian who described the burial rituals of the Scythians. According to his writings, when a leader died, loyal servants would be killed and buried with him to continue serving in the next world. And now, thousands of years later, his words are being confirmed by the very skeletons lying silently beneath the earth. But returning to the gold-covered woman, the biggest question remains unanswered. Who was she? And why did she have to die? Was she a devoted wife who willingly chose to follow her husband, or a victim of a ritual she could not escape? No one can say for certain. All we know is that beneath the glitter of gold and the weight of absolute power, there have always been dark corners of history that are not easily told. And sometimes the most terrifying thing is not death itself, but how humans treat one another before death ever comes. What do you think? 2,000-year-old shipwreck beneath the Turkish Sea reveals a shocking secret. Beneath the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Adrasan in southern Turkey, an underwater archaeological discovery has stunned the world. A shipwreck dating back around 2,000 years lies quietly at a depth of 118 to 148 feet, like a time capsule of an ancient civilization, perfectly preserved beneath the sea. What truly astonished scientists, however, wasn't just the ship's age, but the remarkable condition of its cargo. Hundreds of ceramic artifacts, bowls, plates, trays, and pots adorned with intricate designs have retained their vibrant colors after 2 millennia underwater. Can you imagine that? An ancient treasure, never looted, still resting there as if it had just been loaded onto the ship yesterday. This vessel is believed to date from the late Hellenistic period to the early Roman era. Around the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD, when maritime trade among Mediterranean port cities was at its peak, The artifacts found are not only evidence of a maritime accident, but also vivid proof of an ancient trade network that once stretched across the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey's Minister of Culture and Tourism, Mehmet Nuri Ersoy, even personally dived to the seabed to witness the shipwreck firsthand. He described it as an unprecedented discovery, and that claim is hardly an exaggeration. It is extremely rare for an ancient ship to preserve its cargo structure intact after thousands of years, something that could reshape our understanding of ancient transportation and storage techniques. So what allowed these ceramic items to defy time so spectacularly? The answer lies in a coarse clay coating applied by ancient people before transport. This layer acted like a natural biological sealant, wrapping each item and protecting it from saltwater corrosion and microorganisms. This is the first time scientists have observed this technique used on such a large scale, and it may be the reason the ship's entire cargo appears to have been frozen in time. If you thought only modern humans had advanced packaging solutions, it seems the ancients were far ahead of their time. Archaeologists also believe the ship was carrying everyday goods, likely intended for major port cities or trading outposts along the Mediterranean coast. The neatly arranged cargo, still in its original order and undisturbed, suggests the ship sank suddenly, possibly due to a storm or an underwater collision, rather than looting or gradual decay. This greatly enhances the archaeological value of the wreck, as it allows researchers to study exactly how ancient people packaged, transported, and stored goods, an area we still know surprisingly little about. Of course, this discovery is just one part of a much larger picture. More than 400 shipwrecks have been identified between Patara and Mersin, a staggering number that suggests this region was once a bustling maritime highway in ancient times. Imagine fleets of sailing ships loaded with wine, olive oil, grain, textiles, and pottery, braving rough seas to connect cultures from east to west. Now, thanks to the ocean's remarkable preservation, we are gradually uncovering the colorful pieces of that story. Interestingly, around the same time, surprising archaeological discoveries have been emerging in other parts of the world as well. In Lima, construction workers installing pipelines accidentally uncovered a pre-Inca tomb containing the remains of a child aged 10 to 15. Astonishingly, the body was so well preserved that its dark brown hair remained intact after more than 1,000 years. This shows that, even on opposite sides of the globe, ancient mysteries continue to surface, challenging what we thought we knew about lost civilizations. And it doesn't stop there. In Egypt, scientists have recently proposed a possible explanation for the infamous Pharaoh's Curse, a phenomenon that shocked the world when several members of the team who opened the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922 died under mysterious circumstances. Today, researchers suspect the cause may not have been supernatural, but rather toxic bacteria or fungi that developed within the sealed tomb environment. These findings could even open new directions in modern medicine, particularly in the fight against diseases like cancer. All of these discoveries, from the 2,000-year-old shipwreck in Turkey to the pre-Inca tomb in Peru to the possible explanation behind the Pharaoh's curse, point to one powerful truth. History is not something that is finished. It is still unfolding, day by day, layer by layer of earth, with every deep-sea dive and every accidental excavation. And with each discovery, another door opens, bringing us closer to the ancient mysteries that were never truly lost, only waiting to be told. Skeletons staked through the heart that terrified all of Europe. If one day someone were to excavate an ancient grave, and inside, instead of an ordinary skeleton, they found a body with an iron rod driven straight through its heart, what would you think? A murder? A ritual? Or evidence of something people once believed was real? Vampires? This isn't a story from a movie. It's a real discovery in Sozopol, a small town on the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria. During an excavation near an ancient monastery, archaeologists uncovered two skeletons dating back about 800 years. But what made everyone shudder was this. Each skeleton had an iron rod driven directly through its chest, as if the dead had been pinned to the ground to ensure they could never rise again. Just hearing that sends chills down your spine, doesn't it? According to the National Museum of History in Bulgaria, this was not a rare case. Historian Bojidar Dimitrov stated that the practice of driving iron or wooden stakes through the hearts of the dead was once widespread across many regions of Bulgaria, even lasting into the early 20th century. People in the past believed that those considered evil in life, perhaps cruel nobles, corrupt clergy, or individuals shunned by their communities, would not rest peacefully after death, but instead become the undead. And if they weren't stopped, they would return. That's why those iron stakes were not just lifeless objects, they were a form of protection for the living. People believed that piercing the heart would pin the evil soul to the grave, preventing it from rising at midnight to spread terror. According to estimates, more than 100 skeletons like this have been discovered across Bulgaria, most of them male. Women were rarely suspected of being vampires in the beliefs of that time. However, everything changed when the story spread to Venice. At a mass grave on the island of Lazaretto Nuovo, researchers discovered the skeleton of a woman with a brick tightly wedged between her jaws, meant to prevent the female vampire from feeding on victims of a devastating epidemic that swept through the city in the 16th century. Anthropologist Matteo Borini from the University of Florence suggested that this discovery on the small island of Lazaretto Nuovo in Venice is evidence of a medieval belief that vampires were responsible for the spread of disease, such as the mysterious illness known as the Black Death, actually the plague, which claimed the lives of about 1/3 of Europe's population. When science was not advanced enough to explain the cause, people were forced to find a culprit, and vampires became the perfect target. What's more, what people saw when they exhumed bodies only reinforced those beliefs. After death, bodies can swell due to the buildup of gases, hair and nails may appear to keep growing, and blood can even seep from the mouth. Today, we understand these as normal decomposition processes, but to people in the Middle Ages, these were signs that the person was still alive. Shrouds decaying due to bacteria could expose the teeth, making it seem as though the corpse was eating its own burial cloth. And from that, the image of the shroud eater was born, one of the most terrifying early prototypes of the vampire. In medical and religious texts of the time, the undead were also believed to be the cause of epidemics, slowly draining the life force of the dead to gain strength and return to the world of the living. To destroy them, people didn't just drive stakes through their hearts, they also removed the burial cloth from the mouth and inserted objects that could not be swallowed, such as bricks, or took any measures necessary to seal the mouth of the returning evil. And then, centuries later, that image was reborn in literature when Bram Stoker wrote the novel Dracula in 1897, turning vampires into an immortal symbol in popular culture. But in the end, the most terrifying thing is not vampires. It is human fear when faced with death and unable to explain it. The crypt, containing 281 forgotten mummies on an Italian mountain. Just imagine this. One day, you're standing inside an ancient church high up in the mountains. Everything around you is so quiet you can hear the wind echoing through the walls, and then suddenly you discover that right beneath your feet lies a crypt filled with hundreds of bodies stacked on top of one another. What would that feel like? This isn't a scene from a movie, it's a real discovery in Roccapelago, a small village perched in the north-central mountains of Italy. During the restoration of an old church there, workers uncovered a passage leading underground. At first, people probably assumed it was just an ordinary crypt, like many others found in historic European churches. But when light finally reached the darkness below, every assumption fell apart. It wasn't just a few skeletons, it was hundreds of bodies. A total of 281 individuals were found piled together in a confined space. Adults, children, even infants who never had the chance to grow up were among them. But what left archaeologists completely stunned was that many of these bodies had not decomposed. They were still preserved, skin still clung to bone, tendons remained visible, hands had dried out, yet still held their positions, as if frozen in prayer. According to experts such as Donato Labate, these individuals likely lived between the 16th and 18th centuries, a small isolated mountain community that lived simple lives, yet left behind something remarkably unique after death. What makes this story even more unusual is how they were laid to rest. These bodies did not decay in the typical way. Thanks to two small windows in the church walls, air circulated continuously, creating the perfect conditions for natural mummification. No chemicals, no complex techniques, just time and environment doing all the work. As researchers took a closer look, they discovered that the bodies were still wearing the clothes they had been buried in. Cloaks, thick stockings, shawls, everything remained. The garments, made of wool, linen, and cotton, were simple yet carefully crafted, with delicate decorative details at the cuffs and collars. According to expert Iolanda Silvestri, these clothes reflect a modest lifestyle, nothing extravagant, but clearly made with care and attention. And that's not all. Alongside the bodies were personal belongings, rings, necklaces, religious medallions, crosses made from gold, silver, wood, stone, and even glass. Together, they seem like messages sent from the world of the living to the world beyond. But perhaps the most mysterious discovery was a letter found almost perfectly preserved. Archaeologists believe it may represent a kind of agreement between the deceased and God. In the letter, the person asks for forgiveness for 5 sins committed during their lifetime. A prayer, but also a final confession before crossing into the next world. And then there's one detail that many people find especially haunting. These bodies were not carefully laid to rest as in traditional burials. Instead, they were dropped down through an opening above the church. As a result, many of them ended up in strange positions, stacked in layers, some even forming what looks like a human pyramid. Can you picture that? A cramped space where hundreds of bodies have remained piled together for centuries. And there's more. Researchers also discovered mummified rats among the remains. They likely died from toxic gases that had built up inside the crypt. This only adds to the dark and mysterious atmosphere of the place. But the story doesn't end with the eerie imagery. Deeper studies are gradually revealing how this community once lived, the kind of labor they performed, what they ate, and the diseases they suffered from. Scientists are now conducting DNA analysis, examining teeth, studying tissue samples, even reconstructing 3D facial models of some of the deceased. And do you know what's coming next? Once the research is complete, some of these mummies will be placed on display inside the very same church. That means the people who have slept for hundreds of years will, in a way, meet the world once again. Just thinking about it is enough to give anyone a sense of excitement, and I'm sure you're no exception. The remains of the world's largest Thunderbird discovered in Australia. Can you believe it? Right in the middle of the arid heart of Central Australia, a place that seems to be nothing but wind and sand, scientists have uncovered a secret buried beneath the ground that has left the entire paleontological community stunned. This discovery wasn't just a few bone fragments or faint traces, it was an almost intact skeleton of a creature described as an extreme evolutionary experiment, a giant bird known as a Thunderbird that lived as far back as 8 million years ago. Yes, you heard that right, 8 million years. But what sends chills down people's spines isn't just its age, it's its size and appearance. Scientists describe this Thunderbird as standing up to 10 feet tall and weighing at least 1,100 pounds, comparable in size to a large dinosaur. But even more bizarre is the way its body seems to combine anatomical features that feel strangely mismatched. A massive beak protruding from a relatively small head, mounted on a huge, bulky body, creating a form that is both peculiar and terrifying. This species has been named Dromornis sturtoni, also known by the haunting nickname Sturton's Thunderbird, and it's not by coincidence that it's considered an extreme evolutionary experiment. Its body structure is a strange combination: a relatively small head attached to an oversized beak, a massive torso, and incredibly sturdy legs, all forming a creature that feels both familiar and deeply unsettling. Of course, what makes this discovery truly remarkable isn't just its size or shape, it's the condition of the skeleton. According to Dr. Adam Yates, the bones were found in their original anatomical positions, almost completely undisturbed. In other words, this may be a fully intact skeleton, something any paleontologist would dream of finding in their lifetime. But as you can imagine, excavating a fossil like this is no simple task. It requires an extraordinary level of patience. Even the smallest mistake in assembling the bones could completely distort our understanding of what this ancient creature actually looked like. That's why the process moves slowly, step by step, like solving a puzzle that's millions of years old. Previously, scientists had discovered another specimen near this area, but it consisted only of scattered bone fragments, far from enough to reconstruct the full form. This time, however, the newly discovered skeleton is believed to belong to a female, and having both specimens has allowed researchers to begin identifying differences between males and females, an important piece in understanding this so-called demon duck. If we travel back about 8 million years, these massive creatures once roamed Australia's dry forests, using their enormous beaks to eat fruit and possibly even prey on smaller animals. A giant that was both omnivorous and formidable. enough to make any creature of that time think twice. And the place where it was found, Al-Quda, is not just an ordinary excavation site. It is, in fact, a vast fossil treasure trove, where numerous ancient animals have been discovered, including early kangaroos and ancestral marsupials. But perhaps it is this Thunderbird that brings the prehistoric world to life more vividly than ever before. By now, you're probably starting to realize the evolutionary history of Earth is far more complex than what we've been taught. And sometimes, all it takes is a single skeleton lying silently underground for millions of years to rewrite the entire story of life. Wouldn't you agree? 700-year-old Buddha head, swallowed by tree roots. Can you believe it if I told you that? In the middle of an ancient temple complex hundreds of years old, there is a Buddha statue, not placed on an altar, not housed inside a main hall, but instead tightly embraced by massive tree roots, as if nature itself is deliberately holding on to some hidden secret. Just imagining it gives you chills, doesn't it? Yet this is a completely real story, and it takes place in Ayutthaya, a city that was once among the most magnificent in Thailand. Let's go back to the year 1350. Ayutthaya was founded and quickly became the second capital of the Kingdom of Siam. It wasn't by chance that this place came to symbolize power. From the 14th to the 18th century, Ayutthaya was like the heart of Southeast Asia, a bustling center of trade, cultural exchange, and thriving religious life. The city was built on river islands, surrounded by water, making it ideal for commerce and easy to defend. Towering temples, golden Buddha statues gleaming brilliantly, and majestic architecture all combined to create a scene so grand that if you stood there, you might feel as if you had stepped into an empire that could never fall. But history is never that predictable. In 1767, disaster struck. Burmese forces from Myanmar invaded, launching one of the most devastating attacks in Southeast Asia at the time. Temples were destroyed, Buddha statues were beheaded, fires raged everywhere, and the entire city was swallowed by smoke and ruin. A place that had once reached the height of prosperity was suddenly reduced to a shattered battlefield. It wasn't just a material loss, it was a profound blow to the culture and spirit of the people. And yet, Ayutthaya's story didn't end with destruction. In the 20th century, the Thai government began restoring what remained. Brick by brick, temple by temple, the past was carefully preserved and rebuilt. Then, in 1991, Ayutthaya was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. From a land of ruins, it gradually came back to life, becoming a destination that captures the world's attention. But among hundreds of relics, there is one detail that makes everyone stop and stare. The Buddha head nestled within the roots of a tree at Wat Mahathat. This statue is around 700 years old, and the strange thing is, no one knows exactly how it ended up there. Think about it. How could such a sacred object become lost at the base of a tree? One theory suggests that during the chaos of war, a soldier hid the Buddha head in the roots to protect it from destruction. Over time, the tree, likely a Bodhi tree, grew larger, and its roots slowly wrapped around the statue, creating the image we see today. But that's only a theory. There is no definitive evidence to confirm it. What's truly remarkable is that when you look at the statue, you don't just see something unusual, you feel something deeper. The roots surrounding the Buddha's face don't give a sense of destruction. On the contrary, they seem to protect and shelter it. The scene feels both mysterious and peaceful, as if nature and humanity have become one. And perhaps it is precisely this image that makes Ayutthaya so special. It is not just the ruins of a lost empire, it is a testament to the endurance of time. Despite war, destruction, and loss, this place still stands, telling its story in its own unique way. So if one day you find yourself standing before that Buddha head in the tree roots, do you think it's merely a coincidence? Or is it the way history and nature have come together to preserve a piece of Ayutthaya's soul? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below this video. 450 giant circles in the Amazon rainforest. People have long believed that the Amazon rainforest is a wild, untouched land, somewhere so ancient and pristine that human beings have never truly left a deep mark on it. But then, an unexpected discovery forced everyone to rethink that assumption. Deep within those dense forests, hundreds of massive circular shapes began to emerge, not because anyone went looking for them, but because parts of the forest were cleared. And in that very moment, a secret buried for thousands of years finally started to reveal itself. Specifically, scientists have identified more than 450 mysterious structures scattered across Acre State in western Brazil. These shapes are far from random. They consist of large earthworks forming circles, squares, and even straight connecting lines, almost like a carefully planned system. They are known as geoglyphs, massive designs etched into the ground. But the question that puzzles everyone is, who created them and for what purpose? Hearing this, you might immediately think of Stonehenge in England, right? And yes, many researchers have drawn comparisons between these geoglyphs and the famous stone monument in Wiltshire. The difference is, instead of erecting stones, the ancient people of the Amazon chose to shape the land itself, creating structures that span an enormous area of up to about 5,000 square miles. That number alone raises an important question. Are these simply isolated traces, or could they be the remnants of a forgotten civilization? As researchers dug deeper, scientists from the UK and Brazil uncovered something even more surprising. It turns out that the forests we once believed to be virgin may not be entirely natural after all. According to Dr. Jennifer Watling, these structures provide clear evidence that ancient humans once lived in and significantly shaped this region long ago. To better understand this, researchers reconstructed the vegetation history surrounding the geoglyphs over the past 6,000 years. They didn't just study the surface, they excavated deeper, collecting soil samples from both inside and outside the structures. Then, they analyzed phytoliths, tiny plant fossils made of silica. It may sound complex, but simply put, these microscopic traces allow scientists to determine what kinds of plants once grew there, whether fires occurred, and how humans influenced the environment. And the results were even more surprising. Ancient people in this region did not burn down vast areas of forest for agriculture, nor did they destroy nature the way we often assume. Instead, they created small, controlled clearings, mainly within bamboo forests, to build these mysterious structures. Not only that, they also actively cultivated and maintained valuable plant species, especially palm trees. Over time, the region evolved into something like a prehistoric natural supermarket, a place where humans could harvest resources while still maintaining ecological balance. Hearing this, does it challenge what you've always believed? It suggests that ancient people were not primitive in the way we often imagine. In fact, they may have understood how to live in harmony with the forest better than modern humans do. So when we look at these giant circles, they may not simply be ceremonial sites, even though some theories suggest they were used for occasional ritual gatherings. On a deeper level, they could represent an entire way of life, a way humans once interacted with nature in a fundamentally different way. And here's the most fascinating part. The biodiversity we see in parts of the Amazon today may actually be the result of those ancient human activities. In other words, what we consider natural today may in fact have been quietly shaped by human hands thousands of years ago. If these circles had not been accidentally revealed by deforestation, they might still be lying there, hidden beneath the canopy. And we would continue to believe that the Amazon had never been touched by humans. But now things are different, and I think you already understand how. 2,500-year-old rust-free sword reveals the astonishing metallurgical secrets of the ancients. Some ancient artifacts, once excavated, spark only mild curiosity, but others leave the entire archaeological community stunned. The legendary sword of Goujian is one of those remarkable discoveries. More than half a century ago, during an archaeological excavation in China, researchers opened an ancient tomb buried deep underground. At first, they believed it was simply an ordinary noble's grave from ancient times. However, when the box containing weapons was opened, everyone was astonished to see a sword lying quietly inside, shining so brightly that it looked as if it had been forged only yesterday. What made the discovery even more unbelievable was the fact that the sword had been buried underground for about 2,500 years. In the damp environment of an ancient burial chamber, most metals would normally corrode or rust over time. Yet this sword appeared to be almost completely unaffected. Its surface remained bright, its decorative patterns were still clearly visible, and the blade was so sharp that it demanded caution. There is even a famous story among archaeologists. When one researcher picked up the sword to examine it more closely, he accidentally touched the edge of the blade. The result was immediate. His finger was cut and began to bleed. A blade that had slept for more than 2 millennia yet remained that sharp. Just hearing about it sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? The sword was discovered in 1965 in Guangling County, located in Hubei. It measures about 21.9 inches in length. Although it is not very large, it carries extremely significant historical and cultural value. When researchers closely examined the area near the hilt, they found 8 ancient characters carefully engraved on the blade. The inscription can be translated roughly as, "The king of Yue, Goujian, made this sword for his personal use." Because of this inscription, the weapon was immediately linked to the famous historical figure Goujian. If you have heard stories from ancient Chinese history, this name is probably familiar. The legendary rivalry between Goujian and Fushai is remembered as one of the most famous tales of perseverance and political strategy in ancient history. For that reason, when a sword believed to belong to this king was discovered, it instantly became the center of attention for both scholars and the public. Today, the sword is regarded as a national treasure of China. For many people, its symbolic importance is even compared to Excalibur, the mythical weapon of King Arthur in Western culture. But what truly puzzles scientists is not only its historical significance, it is also the advanced technology hidden behind the sword. When experts analyzed its metallic composition, they discovered that it was made from several elements, including copper, iron, lead, tin, and sulfur. Among these, copper makes up the largest proportion. At first glance, this might sound like a typical ancient alloy. However, the real mystery lies in how the materials were distributed throughout the blade. Studies revealed that different sections of the sword contain different alloy compositions. This means that ancient blacksmiths deliberately adjusted the metal structure in different parts of the sword to achieve the best possible performance. The edge of the blade, which needed to remain extremely sharp, was crafted using a different method, while the central body, where durability was more important, was treated with another formula. For a technology developed more than 2,000 years ago, this represents an extraordinarily sophisticated level of metallurgy. The decorative patterns on the sword also amazed many researchers. The intricate designs were engraved with remarkable precision, forming detailed geometric patterns that even modern technology sometimes requires multiple complex steps to reproduce. When people look at the sword of Goujian, they do not simply see an ancient weapon. They see clear evidence of the astonishing technological skill possessed by ancient craftsmen. It is a relatively small sword, but within it lies a great secret of history, the knowledge, engineering ability, and craftsmanship of human beings who lived 2,500 years ago. 3,700-year-old ancient CD, that still baffles science. What would you think if I told you that, in a world with no modern machinery, no electricity, and no advanced technology, there existed a mysterious recording that resembles an ancient version of a CD? It sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But this object is completely real, and it has puzzled archaeologists for more than a century. That object is known as the Phaistos Disc, an artifact estimated to be around 3,700 years old, dating back to the Minoan civilization of ancient Greece. The disc itself is only about 6.3 inches in diameter and made of fired clay. It may look simple at first glance, but what's inscribed on its surface is what truly sends chills down people's spines. On this small disc, there are 241 pictographic symbols created from 45 completely distinct signs. What makes it even more extraordinary is that these symbols were not carved by hand in the usual way. They appear to have been stamped onto the surface, leading many researchers to believe this could be one of the earliest forms of printing in human history. Just hearing that already feels unusual, right? If you look closely at the symbols, you'll notice a wide range of images. Men in motion, figures wearing feathered headdresses, women, children, animals, birds, even insects, weapons, and plants. All of them are arranged in a spiral pattern, as if telling a story. And yet, ironically, for hundreds of years, no one has truly understood what that story is. The disc was discovered in 1903 by Italian archaeologists during excavations of the ancient Phaistos Palace, located on the southern side of the island of Crete. From the moment it was found, it became one of the greatest mysteries in archaeology, because there are no similar texts to compare it with, and no key to decipher this strange language. It wasn't until decades later that a faint glimmer of hope appeared. Dr. Gareth Owens, a researcher at the Technological Educational Institute of Crete, suggested that he may have partially deciphered the hidden message on the disc. According to him, This is not an ordinary record, but a sacred prayer dedicated to the supreme goddess of the Minoan civilization. Even more intriguingly, among the symbols, he identified a key word that may be read as AKK, meaning pregnant mother. At this point, things start to make a bit more sense. One side of the disc is believed to honor pregnant women, while the other relates to childbirth. In other words, it may be a spiritual symbol connected to fertility, life, and the beliefs of ancient people. But think about it. If this really is a prayer, why would they go to such great lengths to create such a complex system of symbols? And why, even to this day, is there still no explanation that the entire scientific community fully agrees on? It's difficult to answer with certainty, but personally, I believe that perhaps this disc is not just an ancient object. It might be a message sent from the past, waiting for us to become intelligent enough to truly understand it. And who knows, what we now call a mystery might actually be just a small fragment of a civilization that once advanced far beyond what we can imagine. It's entirely possible. After all, what we truly know about the past is still very limited. Legendary object discovered in the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. You know, there are things we often think exist only in legends, yet they suddenly appear in real life, lying silently underground for more than 2,000 years. A perfect example of this comes from the massive mausoleum complex of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China, where archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a strange chariot that had previously been mentioned only in historical tales and folklore. This wasn't a chariot pulled by horses, nor was it pulled by oxen. It was pulled by sheep. Sounds strange just hearing it, doesn't it? This discovery was recorded in the area known as the Western Tomb, part of the mausoleum complex located in Shanxi province, just a few miles northeast of the city of Xi'an. This location is not far from the famous site of the Terracotta Army, one of the greatest archaeological wonders in the world. But this time, what caught people's attention wasn't the clay soldiers, it was the skeletons of sheep. Specifically, researchers uncovered the remains of 6 sheep, still nearly intact, along with harness equipment used for pulling a vehicle. Although the actual wooden chariot had long since decayed, the arrangement of the skeletons alone was enough to make one thing clear. This was not a random group of animals buried by chance. It was a real chariot that once existed. According to lead archaeologist Zhang Wenxiao, horse-drawn and ox-drawn chariots were extremely common in ancient China. But chariots pulled by sheep were incredibly rare. So rare that they were mostly mentioned only in legends and unofficial historical records. And perhaps that rarity is exactly what makes this discovery so remarkable. According to stories passed down through time, this type of chariot was once considered a kind of love chariot of the emperor. The most famous tale is about Emperor Wu of Jin, the founder of the Western Jin Dynasty. Legend has it that each night he would ride in a sheep-drawn chariot through his palace. Wherever the sheep decided to stop, he would spend the night there. It may sound random, but in reality, it was a rather unusual way of choosing among the many concubines in his court. From this story, a curious expression later emerged in Chinese culture: seeking luck in a sheep-drawn chariot, a phrase that reflects both chance and fate in life. Returning to the tomb site, beyond the remains of the 6-sheep chariot, archaeologists also discovered a 4-wheeled wooden chariot, believed to have been horse-drawn, along with a beautifully decorated rectangular canopy. And that's not all. A series of bronze war chariots, iron tools, weapons, and horse-related artifacts were also excavated from the same area. Together, these findings not only help reconstruct aspects of ancient life and rituals, but also provide a clearer picture of the early Iron Age in China, a time when technology, warfare, and power began reshaping the course of history. At present, samples from the Western Tomb are still being analyzed in laboratories. Scientists hope to soon determine the identity of the tomb's occupant. No one knows for certain whether it belonged to a member of the royal family, a powerful noble, or perhaps even someone directly connected to the emperor. What we do know is that the entire mausoleum complex of Qin Shi Huang spans about 10 square miles and took 36 years to complete, a massive structure filled with countless unsolved mysteries. And perhaps this strange sheep-drawn chariot is only a small piece of that enormous puzzle. 13,000-year-old stone settlement in Arabia that could rewrite history. There is a land that, for many years, was believed to be a barren desert, too harsh for human life to ever exist. And yet today, that very place has revealed evidence of an entire community that lived there tens of thousands of years ago. That place is Fujairah, a region in the United Arab Emirates. Until now, this area was thought to have been settled by humans only around 7,000 years ago. In other words, for a long time before that, it was essentially erased from the map of human habitation. But a recent large-scale excavation has completely changed that narrative. More than 30 archaeological sites have been discovered scattered across the region. What's remarkable is that these sites are not isolated, they are connected, forming a large settlement known as Jabal Kaf Adur. This is not evidence of a few wandering groups. It is proof of a stable, long-standing community. What has been found here is truly thought-provoking. Archaeologists have uncovered early forms of stone houses, built using high-quality limestone readily available in the area. These shelters were not primitive or random. They were strategically placed, allowing people to easily access various types of terrain, from plains and the western foothills of the Al-Hajar Mountains to nearby water sources. You see, they weren't just surviving. They were choosing where to live with remarkable intelligence. And there's more. The sediment layers at the site reveal 3 distinct levels of habitation, containing stone tools, animal bones, and traces of hearths. This indicates that humans lived here continuously from about 13,000 to 7,500 years ago. In other words, they didn't just pass through, they settled and stayed. Previously, there was a theory suggesting that humans may have appeared in this region early on, but then left during the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago, when the climate became extremely harsh and dry for thousands of years. But this new discovery proves the opposite. Humans did not leave. They stayed, adapted, and endured. Around 10,500 years ago, the environment in this region began to change. The climate gradually became more humid due to the balance of different weather systems. Today, Fujairah lies at the intersection of multiple climate influences, from winter rains and hot summer shamal winds to monsoon systems from the Indian Ocean. This unique combination created conditions that allowed human life to persist. But what makes this discovery truly significant is not just that the climate eventually became more favorable. It's that humans were already here long before that, around 13,000 years ago, when the world was still locked in a cold ice age. In other words, they lived here when conditions were at their worst. The timeline of this settlement also coincides with the period when agriculture first began to emerge in the Near East, considered the cradle of early farming, around 12,000 years ago. Meanwhile, it wasn't until about 11,700 years ago that glaciers in the northern hemisphere began to retreat, and more than 10,000 years ago, before the Ice Age truly came to an end. So what does this mean? It means that while much of the world was still struggling with extreme cold, in one corner of the Arabian Peninsula, humans had already begun building a way of life, adapting to their environment, and possibly even laying the groundwork for the earliest developments of agriculture. By now you can probably see it too. The history we thought we knew may not be entirely accurate, and who knows, beneath those seemingly lifeless sands, there may still be countless other secrets waiting to be uncovered. It's just a matter of whether we're patient enough to dig a little deeper. 13 alien-like skulls discovered near a Maya pyramid. At the archaeological site of Moral Reforma, located in the state of Tabasco, Mexico, scientists have uncovered 13 skulls dating back more than 1,000 years. This was once an ancient city of the Maya civilization, a culture that flourished for centuries before being abandoned around 1000 AD. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the number of skulls, it was their shape. These skulls are unusually elongated toward the back, resembling what we often see in movies about extraterrestrials. At first glance, you might even think they belong to something not of this earth. However, the truth points in a completely different direction. Research shows that this unusual shape was not natural, but the result of an ancient practice known as cranial deformation. Maya children had their heads bound for years, causing their skulls to grow in an elongated form. It may sound cruel, but to them, it was a sign of status, a symbol of the elite class in their society. Even that alone shows how different their beliefs were from ours. But the most unsettling part comes next. Among the 13 skulls, At least 2 show clear signs of being cleanly cut in half, with remarkably sharp and precise edges. These are not cracks from age, nor accidental damage. They are evidence of deliberate human action. This detail has led scientists to believe that these individuals were victims of a chilling sacrificial ritual, and the place where this ritual took place was none other than a pyramid, also serving as a temple, located in the eastern plaza of the ancient city. Just imagine it. In a sacred space where people once prayed and worshipped, bloody sacrifice rituals were carried out. Individuals who once held high status, their skulls carefully shaped since childhood, ultimately became offerings to the gods. Isn't that terrifying? All of these findings were announced after extensive research conducted by Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. Their goal was not only to understand death, but also to decode life, examining everything from customs and rituals to the diet of the ancient Maya. So far, scientists have conducted detailed analysis on only 5 of the 13 skulls. The results show that all of them were male, ranging in age from approximately 17 to 45 years old, determined through the level of tooth wear. Some were very young, which makes the question even heavier. Why were they chosen for sacrifice? And there's more. Another mysterious detail is that some of the graves were covered in a red substance believed to be cinnabar, a material typically reserved for elite burial rituals. The arrangement of the tombs also appears highly ceremonial, as if everything had been carefully prepared for a specific purpose. But what that purpose was remains unknown. It could have been to pray for rain, for good harvests, or to appease the gods during difficult times. Or perhaps it held a deeper meaning that we still don't fully understand. What we do know is this: these alien-like skulls are not evidence of extraterrestrial beings, but rather, they are traces of a civilization whose beliefs and rituals were so complex that even modern humans can't help but feel a chill when looking back at them. 6 skeletons showing signs of cancer, discovered in Egypt, dating back 3,000 years. My friend, what would you think if someone told you that cancer, the disease we often consider a modern illness, actually existed thousands of years ago? It sounds hard to believe, doesn't it? Yet a recent archaeological discovery at the Dakhla Oasis in Egypt is forcing scientists to rethink everything we thought we knew about the history of this disease. The story begins at an ancient cemetery located in the Dakhla Oasis. Here, researchers carried out excavations at a burial site dating back roughly 1,500 to 3,000 years. And in this place that seemed to hold only silent traces of the distant past, they uncovered a surprising truth: evidence of cancer in ancient human skeletons. As the excavation began, experts gradually discovered hundreds of skeletons resting beneath layers of sand. After many years of careful research, archaeologists eventually uncovered a total of 1,087 skeletons. Each skeleton was like a fragment of history, telling the story of how people once lived in the ancient world. But among them, 6 skeletons quickly captured the attention of scientists. When researchers carefully analyzed the bone structures of these 6 individuals, they noticed unusual abnormalities, distinctive lesions that modern medicine clearly recognizes today as signs of cancer. That's right, cancer, the disease many people believe only became common in modern society, was apparently already present thousands of years ago. What surprised experts even more was the age of some of the individuals who suffered from the disease. Among the 6 skeletons were 2 young women, identified through skeletal structure and anatomical features. Both showed evidence of cervical cancer, and both died at a very young age, between about 20 and 30 years old. Thinking about how these young women, living thousands of years ago, had to struggle with such a dangerous disease is something that truly makes people pause and reflect. Even more striking, researchers also discovered the skeleton of a young man who showed signs of testicular cancer. Like the 2 women, this man also died at a young age, likely between 20 and 30 years old. 3 cases appearing in individuals in the prime of their lives raised many questions for scientists. Could it be that cancer has existed in ancient societies far longer than we once believed? Among the 6 skeletons, there was also an older man who showed signs of colorectal cancer. In addition, scientists discovered the remains of an elderly woman who appeared to have suffered from either ovarian cancer or breast cancer. These findings suggest that cancer did not affect only a specific group of people, but appeared across different age groups in ancient society. However, perhaps the most heartbreaking case involved the final skeleton. It belonged to a Sal child estimated to be only about 3 to 5 years old. When experts analyzed the child's bones, they found signs consistent with leukemia, also known as blood cancer. The thought that a child who lived thousands of years ago also had to battle such a devastating illness left many researchers deeply moved. These discoveries are forcing scientists to reconsider the history of cancer in human society. For a long time, many people believed cancer was largely a modern disease, linked to environmental pollution or contemporary lifestyles. But the evidence from the ancient cemetery at the Dakhla Oasis suggests the opposite. Cancer has existed for thousands of years. However, the research also revealed something quite interesting. According to scientists, the rate of cancer in Egypt about 3,000 years ago was estimated to be only about 5 out of every 1,000 people. That number is at least 50 times lower than the rate seen today. So what has caused cancer to become so much more common in the modern world? Is it the environment, our lifestyle, or factors we still don't fully understand? And if cancer has existed for thousands of years, how many more secrets about this disease might still be hidden beneath the sands of time? What do you think about this discovery? Could these ancient skeletons help us better understand one of humanity's most dangerous diseases? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below so everyone can join the discussion. 3 skeletons with severed legs and crushed skulls. A brutal punishment 1,500 years ago. In the quiet countryside of Cambridgeshire, England, a place that today is filled only with green fields and peaceful country roads, archaeologists accidentally uncovered a chilling story from about 1,500 years ago. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a routine archaeological excavation. But the deeper the experts dug into the ancient layers of soil, the more they realized that this place had once witnessed a horrifying event that history had almost completely forgotten. The story began when archaeologists discovered 3 male skeletons scattered throughout the excavation site. At first glance, they appeared to be nothing more than ordinary ancient remains. However, as the experts began examining the bones more closely, they noticed disturbing details that sent chills down their spines. All 3 skeletons had their legs severed, and even more disturbingly, their skulls had been smashed. These injuries were not caused by time or natural decay. Instead, they were clearly the result of extremely brutal violence. 2 of the 3 skeletons were found lying next to each other in what appeared to be an ancient garbage pit. That alone already sounds strange, doesn't it? Normally, the dead would be carefully buried according to the burial customs of their time. But in this case, the 2 men seem to have been discarded as if they were given no respect in death at all. The 3rd skeleton was discovered in an ancient Roman well located nearby. This led researchers to ask a major question. What exactly happened to these 3 men? To answer that question, experts conducted detailed examinations and analyses. After carefully studying the remains, researchers believe that these men may have endured extreme suffering before their deaths. The cuts on their legs and the heavy blows to their skulls suggest that they may have been tortured or subjected to an extremely harsh form of punishment. In other words, their deaths were far from ordinary. Instead, they may have been victims of a terrifying form of punishment in ancient society. To better understand the context of this grim story, archaeologists tried to determine when these men had lived. The results suggested that they may have lived sometime between 42 AD and 410 AD. This was a crucial period in the history of Britain because it was during this time that Claudius, the emperor of the Roman Empire, launched his conquest and expanded Roman control into the land that is now Britain. As researchers continued surveying the surrounding area, they began discovering additional important clues. One of the most notable findings was a large defensive ditch measuring about 10 feet wide and roughly 5 feet deep. Structures like this were commonly built to protect military camps. In addition, archaeologists also uncovered the remains of large roads in the area, clear evidence that this location had once been an important site, possibly a place where soldiers and merchants frequently passed through. And that was not all. Numerous ancient artifacts were also discovered across the excavation site. These items showed clear Roman military influence, including fragments of pottery, everyday household objects, and traces connected to military life. All of this evidence has led researchers to believe that this site was once a Roman military camp during the time when the Romans controlled the region. And if that theory is correct, then the story of the 3 skeletons becomes even more disturbing. Were they prisoners, criminals, or perhaps rebels who had resisted Roman rule? Or could they have been punished according to the harsh laws of that era? The truth remains unknown. But try to imagine the scene more than 1,000 years ago. In the middle of a disciplined Roman military camp, under the authority and power of the Roman Empire, 3 men faced a horrifying punishment. How brutal must that moment have been? Honestly, it's almost too horrifying to even imagine. An 18,000-year-old puppy mummy. At first glance, many people might think this is simply a small puppy curled up in a deep sleep. Its fur is still intact, and its tiny face looks peaceful, as if it were only waiting for someone to wake it up. If this puppy were placed inside a veterinary clinic, some people might even assume it was lying there patiently waiting for its turn to get vaccinated. But the truth behind it is astonishing, because this puppy has been sleeping for 18,000 years. Yes, you heard that right. After 18,000 years, it remains preserved in such remarkable condition. This extraordinary discovery was made by researchers in the summer of 2018 near the city of Yakutsk, located in northeastern Siberia. The region is famous for its permafrost, where the ground remains frozen almost year-round. These extremely cold conditions have created a kind of natural archive that preserves many ancient organisms in nearly perfect condition. And this puppy is one of the most remarkable examples. When scientists first discovered it, they could hardly believe their eyes. The body was still complete, its soft fur clearly visible, and its tiny teeth still neatly set inside its small snout. Even many of the internal organs were preserved remarkably well. For a creature that had been buried underground for tens of thousands of years, such preservation is incredibly rare. Because the specimen is so well preserved, researchers have been able to conduct detailed analyses. Based on the structure of its bones and other biological indicators, scientists determined that the puppy was only about 2 months old when it died. Dating methods suggest that it lived roughly 18,000 years ago, during the final stages of the last ice age. However, the question that puzzles scientists the most is surprisingly simple. Was it a dog or a wolf? That may sound strange, but the two species are very closely related. Modern dogs are believed to be descendants of wolves, and the domestication process may have begun tens of thousands of years ago. Because of this, when scientists examine such ancient specimens, distinguishing between the two can sometimes be extremely difficult. If the final conclusion proves that this animal was indeed a dog, the discovery could reshape how we understand the history of humanity's most loyal companion. In that case, this tiny puppy could become one of the oldest dogs ever discovered in the world. Genetics professor Love Dallin, who participated in studying the specimen, said he was truly amazed by the level of preservation of this mummy. Over the past 18,000 years, Earth has gone through countless changes. Ice has melted, climates have shifted, many animal species have gone extinct, and humans have gradually built civilizations. Yet this puppy remained quietly preserved in the frozen ground, almost untouched by the relentless passage of time. Meanwhile, Arnold Sergei Fedorov, the photographer who captured the famous images of the puppy, still vividly remembers the feeling of seeing it for the first time. According to him, that moment felt like touching a piece of Earth's history. A tiny creature that had remained in the same position for tens of thousands of years, undisturbed and unharmed. Just imagine this for a moment. When this puppy was alive, humans were still hunting across the frozen landscapes of the Ice Age. Herds of woolly mammoths still wandered across icy steppes. Thousands of human generations were born, lived their lives, and disappeared, while this small puppy remained quietly beneath the frozen ground. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? A tiny creature only 2 months old accidentally became a silent witness to nearly 20,000 years of our planet's history. And who knows, within the DNA of this sleeping puppy might still lie the answer to a major question. Was it one of the very first dogs to ever live alongside humans, or simply a prehistoric wolf pup? It is entirely possible, because the story of this 18,000-year-old puppy is like a doorway into the past, reminding us that sometimes the greatest secrets of history are preserved inside the smallest creatures. Archaeological site reveals a strange burial ritual of the Shang Dynasty in China. If you ever look down upon the ancient lands along the Yellow River, where Chinese civilization first emerged and developed, you would likely find a famous archaeological site that has fascinated scientists for nearly a century. Yes, this place is the Jinsha, located on the outskirts of Anyang. The site stretches across both the northern and southern banks of the Yellow River and covers an area of roughly 11.6 square miles. Just hearing that number alone gives you a sense of how vast this archaeological site is, and how many secrets from the past it may still hold. The story began in the 1920s when archaeologists first started excavating the area. Since then, for nearly 100 years, layer after layer of ancient soil has been uncovered. Artifacts have gradually emerged, and each new discovery has helped us better understand one of the most important ancient civilizations in Asia. Because of its immense historical value, in 2006, the UNESCO officially recognized Jinsha as a World Heritage Site. But what makes this place especially fascinating is that not all of its secrets lie within ancient palaces, bronze artifacts, or the famous oracle bone inscriptions. Sometimes, the most surprising stories come from something as simple as animal bones. It may sound ordinary, but these fragments have helped scientists better understand how people lived thousands of years ago. Recently, zoo archaeologists, experts who study animal remains found at archaeological sites, analyzed a large number of bones discovered in the area, and the results were quite surprising. Archaeological evidence suggests that people living during the Shang Dynasty, more than 3,000 years ago, had already domesticated several familiar animals, such as pigs, dogs, cattle, sheep, and horses. These animals were far more than just a source of food. In ancient society, they played extremely important roles in daily life. While alive, they helped humans in many ways. For example, cattle and horses assisted with heavy labor, sheep provided wool, and other animals supplied milk and various resources. Even after they died, their usefulness continued. Their meat became food, while their bones were used to make tools, jewelry, and even ritual objects. However, during their research, scientists noticed something extremely unusual. According to researcher Li Jipeng, when people of the Shang Dynasty performed burial rituals, they often did not bury the entire animal. Instead, they selected only specific parts of the animal's body to place in the tomb. And the part most commonly chosen was the left front leg. Hearing that might make many people wonder the same thing archaeologists did. Why the left front leg and not another part of the body? What makes this even more intriguing is that this pattern appeared repeatedly in many excavated tombs. Because of this consistency, experts believe it was not a coincidence, but rather part of a strict ritual practice in ancient society. In other words, the people of the Shang Dynasty may have believed that this particular body part carried some kind of spiritual meaning, possibly related to religious beliefs, sacrificial rituals, or special views about the afterlife. When we think about it, archaeology sometimes feels like assembling a giant puzzle from very tiny pieces. From just a single fragment of animal bone, scientists can uncover how ancient people raised livestock, how they used natural resources, and even how they thought about the sacred and the spiritual. And because animals played so many roles in daily life, from labor and food to rituals, the study of animal remains has opened an entirely new window into ancient societies. It shows us that to truly understand people in the past, sometimes we must begin with the smallest details. And honestly, isn't that fascinating? CT scans of 2,000-year-old mummies, the hidden secrets of two Egyptian priests revealed. For a long time, people have believed that beneath the ancient linen wrappings of Egyptian mummies lies not only the body of the deceased, but also stories preserved from thousands of years of history. However, for many years, unwrapping those layers of linen to study what was inside was nearly impossible because doing so could damage these priceless artifacts. Then modern science introduced a completely new approach. Instead of physically opening the mummies, scientists decided to look through them using advanced imaging technology. At Keck Medicine of USC, part of the University of Southern California, radiologists launched a special project using high-resolution CT scanning to explore two ancient Egyptian mummies that had been preserved for more than 2,000 years. By running extremely thin scan slices along the entire bodies, they collected hundreds of detailed images. These images were then assembled by experts into 3D digital models, essentially reconstructing the bodies of people who had lived thousands of years ago. The two mummies examined in this project both belonged to ancient Egyptian priests, men who once held important roles in religious ceremonies. The first was named Nes Min, who lived around 33 BC. The second was Nes Hor, who lived earlier, around 190 BC. When the first CT images appeared on the computer screens, scientists could almost see their real faces after more than 2 millennia. The 3D models revealed eyelids, lips, and the bone structure of their faces with astonishing clarity. This offered a completely different perspective from the familiar image of mummies wrapped tightly in linen. For the first time, experts could closely observe the individual facial features of people who had lived thousands of years ago. But the most fascinating discoveries were not limited to their faces. It was their health that told the most interesting stories. As researchers continued analyzing the internal scans of their bodies, they began discovering signs of age and disease, details that had previously been extremely difficult to detect. In the case of Nesmin, the CT images revealed a clear injury in the lower spine. One of the vertebrae had partially collapsed, a type of damage that usually occurs when the spine experiences long-term pressure or gradual wear over time. In simpler terms, it is possible that this priest spent many years standing for long periods during religious ceremonies or performing physically demanding duties, causing his spine to deteriorate as he aged. The case of Neshor, however, told a different story. CT images showed that several of his teeth had severe cavities. This may sound like a small problem today, but in ancient times, tooth decay could cause long-lasting pain because there were no effective treatments like the ones we have now. In addition, scientists discovered serious degeneration in one of his hip joints. Injuries like this often make walking difficult and can cause pain whenever a person moves. Based on the condition of his bones and the level of wear in his body, experts believe that Neshor likely died at an older age than Nesmin. This suggests that even in ancient societies, people could live to an advanced age. But they also suffered from many of the same age-related health problems that humans experience today. When you think about it, it's quite remarkable. With nothing more than CT scanning technology, scientists can study an entire human life without ever opening a mummy, from appearance and physical health to the hidden signs of disease. Those thin slices captured by the scanner seem to tell the story of 2 priests who lived more than 2,000 years ago along the Nile River. So what do you think? If modern technology can reveal so much from just 2 mummies, how many other secrets of ancient Egypt might still be resting quietly inside tombs that have yet to be studied? Personally, I believe there are many more waiting to be discovered. Treasure of 40,000 Roman coins, discovered beneath the floor of a house in France. You know, ancient history always has its own mysterious and fascinating charm. Sometimes its secrets are not hidden in grand palaces or enormous tombs, but quietly buried beneath the ground of an ordinary old house. A perfect example of this happened during an excavation carried out by INRAP in the village of Senon, in northeastern France. During the dig, archaeologists unexpectedly uncovered a secret that had remained hidden for nearly 2,000 years: 3 ancient jars filled with tens of thousands of Roman coins. At first, as the layers of ancient soil were gradually removed, archaeologists noticed that beneath the floor of an old building were several large jars carefully buried in sturdy pits. These jars were known as amphorae, a common type of ceramic container in the ancient world often used to store wine, oil, or food. But this time, what was inside them was completely different. When experts opened the first jar, they discovered a massive pile of coins stacked tightly inside. According to coin researcher Vincent Genevieve, who is currently studying the treasure, the first jar contained about 84 pounds of coins, which equals roughly 23,000 to 24,000 Roman coins. Just one jar alone held what would have been an enormous fortune in ancient times. Pretty impressive, right? But the surprises did not stop there. When archaeologists continued excavating the second jar, they realized it was even heavier. The total weight of coins inside was estimated to be about 110 pounds. Although the jar was broken at the neck when it was discovered, researchers still found around 400 coins that had spilled outside. From that number, they estimated that the jar originally contained roughly 18,000 to 19,000 coins. The third jar, however, was far more mysterious. When archaeologists uncovered it, only 3 coins remained inside the pit where the jar had once been buried. Most of the treasure had apparently disappeared long before the archaeologists arrived. This raises an interesting question. Was the jar looted in ancient times, or did the coins simply vanish over the centuries as time passed? When everything is added together, these 3 jars once contained more than 40,000 Roman coins, an extremely impressive number for any archaeological discovery. What makes this discovery even more fascinating is the way the jars were positioned inside the house. They were not buried deeply or hidden like a secret treasure. Instead, the mouths of the jars were level with the ground, located directly beneath the floor of the living room. This placement made it very easy to take coins out whenever needed. In simple terms, these jars functioned much like ancient piggy banks, where the owner could deposit money and withdraw it whenever they wished. Because of this detail, experts believe the coins were not buried in a hurry during wartime. Instead, the jars may have served as a long-term savings method for people living in the settlement about 1,700 years ago. The coins themselves also reveal fascinating historical information. On the surfaces of many coins appear the portraits of emperors such as Victorinus, Tetricus I, and his son Tetricus II. They ruled the Gallic Empire, a state that split from the Roman Empire and controlled the region of Gaul from 260 to 274 AD before being reabsorbed into the empire by Emperor Aurelian. The settlement where the treasure was discovered was once quite developed. Archaeologists found several stone houses, some even equipped with underfloor heating systems, as well as basements and workshops with furnaces. Nearby, the remains of a Roman fortress were also discovered, indicating that this area was once a busy and thriving community. However, in the early 4th century, a massive fire destroyed the entire settlement. Although the area was later rebuilt, another fire eventually struck, and the residents were finally forced to abandon the land forever. And so, the 3 piggy banks filled with coins were left forgotten beneath the house floor for nearly 2,000 years. An enormous fortune that someone had once saved coin by coin, only to be swallowed by time in the end. So what do you think? Who was the true owner of this hidden fortune? And why did they never return to reclaim such an enormous amount of money? Can you guess? If you know any interesting facts or theories about this treasure, feel free to share them with everyone. Burned human remains. Found in a 2,300-year-old tomb in Istanbul, Turkey. In the heart of Istanbul, where modern streets are layered over thousands of years of history, archaeologists have recently uncovered an ancient tomb that has drawn particular attention from researchers. At first, it might sound like just another routine archaeological discovery, but when experts began examining the interior more carefully, they realized that this tomb had an extremely rare feature, something that caused many scientists to pause and raise a series of new questions. The tomb has been dated to about 2,300 years ago, meaning it originates from a very distant period of antiquity. When the layers of soil above it were carefully cleared away, archaeologists discovered human remains inside the burial chamber. However, what surprised them most was the condition of the body. It appeared that the deceased had been placed inside the tomb first, and only afterward was the tomb set on fire. This detail is highly unusual, because in many ancient cultures, cremation typically occurred before burial, not after the body had already been laid in a tomb. Because of this unusual feature, experts decided to conduct a deeper investigation. They analyzed not only the structure of the tomb, but also historical records and ancient documents related to the area where it was discovered. And the more they studied it, the more fascinating the story behind the tomb became. By comparing historical sources, researchers discovered that this area was once known as Chalcedon. It was once a prosperous city during the Hellenistic period, roughly between 323 BC and 33 BC. At that time, the region held an extremely important position in trade and commerce. If you look at a map, you'll see that it lies very close to the Bosphorus, the famous strait that connects Asia and Europe and provides access to the Black Sea. Thousands of years ago, this was a busy maritime route where countless merchant ships passed through every day. Historical documents suggest that between 235 BC and 220 BC, the city of Chalcedon cooperated with a nearby major city called Byzantium to collect tolls from ships traveling through the Bosphorus Strait. In other words, they effectively controlled one of the most important trade routes of the ancient world. To carry out this system, the two cities even received support from the navy of Ptolemaic Dynasty, which ruled Egypt at the time. This shows that the region once held considerable influence within ancient trade networks. Returning to the mysterious tomb that was recently discovered, archaeologists found more than just burned human remains. Inside the tomb, they also uncovered a terracotta cup and an ancient perfume bottle. These small objects are actually very significant because they may reflect the funerary rituals practiced by people living in this region more than 2 millennia ago. According to Rahmi Asal, the discovery could help scientists better understand the burial customs of residents during the Hellenistic period. The reason is simple. Placing a body inside a tomb and then burning the tomb afterward is a practice rarely seen in archaeology. It is very possible that this action carried some special religious or ritual meaning that we still do not fully understand today. Perhaps it was a way for ancient people to send off the soul of the deceased, or maybe it was a ritual reserved only for individuals who held a particular status within society. Although we cannot yet know the full truth, this discovery shows us something remarkable. Sometimes, a single small tomb buried beneath the ground of Istanbul can remind us that every archaeological discovery, even something as simple as a cup, a perfume bottle, or a few charred bones, can open an entire window into the world of the past. A giant sinkhole reveals a legendary 2,000-year-old royal tomb. Sometimes the greatest archaeological discoveries begin with completely accidental moments, not in laboratories or carefully planned expeditions, but right in the middle of an ordinary construction site. And this story began in exactly that way, when a group of workers were digging at a construction site in Guangzhou, near Shangang Mountain. While heavy machinery was operating, the ground suddenly collapsed and a massive dark sinkhole appeared, deep and mysterious. Everyone standing nearby was startled by the unexpected sight. News spread quickly. Some people speculated that it might be an ancient defensive structure from a time of war. Others let their imaginations run even further, joking that perhaps it was a mysterious structure left behind by aliens. The rumors quickly made the area lively with curiosity and speculation. But while people were still discussing what it might be, someone who understood the potential importance of the discovery immediately stepped in. That person was Deng Qinlin, the infrastructure manager of the construction project. Having participated in several archaeological excavations before, he sensed right away that something about the discovery was unusual. He immediately ordered the area to be sealed off and contacted the Guangdong Provincial Cultural Heritage Administration so that experts could come to investigate. When the archaeological team arrived and began carefully examining the site, the atmosphere quickly changed. After hours of analyzing the soil structure and surrounding clues, the experts could barely hide their excitement. They announced that what lay beneath the ground might be an extremely important ancient tomb. Almost immediately, a theory began circulating. Many believed that the tomb might belong to Zhao Tuo, the emperor who founded the Nanyue kingdom. The Nanyue kingdom once existed in the Lingnan region during the Western Han Dynasty, and Zhao Tuo was its founding ruler. Historical records say that Zhao Tuo had originally been a general under the Qin Dynasty. After being sent south on a military campaign, he took advantage of the chaos that followed the collapse of the Qin Dynasty to gradually build his own power, eventually becoming the ruler of the entire region. Zhao Tuo was known for being extremely cautious. According to legend, before his death, he ordered several fake tombs to be built across the region. During his funeral, 4 groups of people carried 4 identical coffins in 4 different directions. The purpose was to confuse everyone so that no one would know the true location of his burial. Because of this, for thousands of years, the real royal tomb of the Nanyue kingdom remained a mystery that archaeologists constantly tried to solve. However, after careful investigation and research, scientists reached a surprising conclusion. This tomb did not belong to Zhao Tuo. Instead, the person buried inside was Zhao Mo, his grandson and the second ruler of the Nanyue kingdom. Once official permission was granted, the excavation of Zhao Mo's tomb began. And what archaeologists discovered inside astonished the entire research community. One by one, priceless treasures emerged after lying underground for more than 2,000 years. One of the most astonishing artifacts was a pillow made of pearls, the first object of its kind ever discovered in China. Another remarkable item was a piece of African ivory measuring about 4.1 feet long, evidence that the Nanyue kingdom had extensive trade connections in ancient times. Even more extraordinary was a funerary suit made entirely of jade, which is now considered the only artifact of its kind ever found. In total, archaeologists excavated more than 10,000 artifacts from the tomb. These relics are not only valuable in terms of material wealth, they also carry enormous historical significance, helping researchers better understand the culture of the Lingnan region more than 2,000 years ago. Many experts have even described the discovery with powerful words such as one of a kind, irreplaceable, and one of the greatest discoveries in Chinese archaeology. And to think that it all began with nothing more than a giant sinkhole suddenly appearing at a construction site. Kind of ironic, isn't it? 14,000-year-old campsite in Alaska. In the frozen wilderness of Alaska, where small streams wind through the Tanana Valley and winters seem to last forever, archaeologists have uncovered something that may force historians to rethink part of human history. What they discovered were the remains of a prehistoric campsite where people stopped and lived about 14,000 years ago. This site is known as the Holdsman Site, located along the quiet Shaw Creek. At first glance, the area appears unremarkable, just soil, rocks, and dense forest. But as layer after layer of earth was carefully excavated, the past seemed to slowly reveal its voice. Scientists soon realized that this location was not simply a random stop along an ancient journey. Archaeological evidence shows that people returned to this campsite repeatedly over a long period during prehistoric times. This period coincides with the end of the last ice age, a time when Earth's climate, wildlife, and landscapes were undergoing dramatic changes. As the massive ice sheets gradually retreated, new land began to emerge. It was during this moment in history that humans started moving deeper into North America. At this ancient campsite, archaeologists discovered many traces of early human life. There were fragments of stone broken during tool making, the remains of campfires that once burned brightly during cold nights, animal bones, and even a massive mammoth tusk. Remarkably, many of these objects were well preserved within layers of sediment that accumulated over thousands of years. In the deepest soil layer, dated to around 14,000 years ago, researchers discovered an area that had once been scorched by a campfire. Scattered around it were tiny bird bones, bones from large mammals, and countless fragments of quartz stone. And within this same layer, archaeologists found a nearly intact mammoth tusk. That discovery alone was enough to make researchers pause and wonder, what exactly had ancient people done with such an enormous tusk? The answer slowly emerged as scientists continued analyzing other layers of soil in the same area. In another geological layer, they discovered an extremely high concentration of quartz fragments, clear evidence of tool-making activity. Even more fascinating, however, was the evidence showing that ancient people had directly worked mammoth ivory at this site. They cut and carved the massive tusk into long rods and tool blanks. These ivory rods were not simple decorative objects. According to researchers, they may represent the earliest known examples in the Americas of tools made from ivory. This means that 14,000 years ago, humans had already learned how to use resources from enormous animals to create tools that helped them survive. When scientists examined the ivory under microscopes, they noticed clear-cut marks and carving traces on its surface. The surrounding fragments matched the shaping process, much like wood chips scattered around a carpenter carving a large log. All these small details show that the manufacturing process was far from random. It was deliberate and carefully planned. Not only the ivory, but also the stone tools found at the Holdsman site revealed many interesting clues. Most of them were made from quartz collected from sources near the campsite. However, some tools were crafted from slate and siltstone, types of rock that were not always readily available at the site itself. This suggests that ancient people already understood how to choose appropriate materials and even carried them along while traveling across different regions. Analysis of scratch marks on the stones and the shaping patterns of tool cores indicates that the manufacturing process followed a fairly organized sequence. In other words, these prehistoric people were not simply smashing rocks to create sharp edges. They had techniques, experience, and even their own technological traditions. All the discoveries at the Holdsman campsite are gradually forming a larger picture. They suggest that nomadic groups once moved across eastern Beringia, the land that connected Asia and North America during the Ice Age, carrying with them similar technologies and ways of life. So the question remains, were the people who once sat around campfires in the Tanana Valley among the very first humans to enter North America? If that is true, then this small campsite, buried for 14,000 years, may represent one of the earliest footprints of humanity's journey to explore and eventually settle an entire continent. The skeleton of a vampire child, shackled in a grave for 400 years. You know, some fears don't come from what we see, but from what people believe to be real. And in Europe, hundreds of years ago, one of the greatest fears haunting people was vampires. It may sound like something out of a movie, but for people in the 17th century, this fear was very real. And it was that very fear that led to burial practices so strange that even modern archaeologists shudder when they uncover them. A clear example of this was discovered in a small village called Pien, near Ostromecko in Poland. Researchers recently uncovered a very unusual set of remains. It was the skeleton of a child, about 5 to 7 years old, buried face down with its legs firmly shackled to the ground. Just think about it. Why would anyone do that to a child? According to researchers, this was not a random or impulsive act. It was part of a burial ritual meant to prevent the dead from returning. In other words, this child had been considered a vampire. That may sound hard to believe, but when you look at what else was found nearby, the story becomes even more disturbing. In the same cemetery, just a year earlier, the research team discovered another grave, this time belonging to a woman. Her big toe had been shackled, and a sharp sickle had been placed across her neck. The intention was clear. If the dead tried to rise, the sickle would immediately slice through her throat. Just hearing that alone shows how deep the fear ran back then, doesn't it? Professor Dariusz Polinsky, the archaeologist who led both excavations, stated that the two graves were only about 6.5 feet apart. This suggests that these were not isolated cases, but part of a larger, unusual burial ground. In fact, the site is believed to have been a temporary cemetery for those who were ostracized, people who were not allowed to be buried in official Christian graveyards. The reasons could vary: unusual behavior during life, physical differences caused by illness, or deaths under mysterious circumstances. You see, back then, being even slightly different was enough to make the entire community fear you. A terrifying time, wouldn't you agree? But it gets even more unsettling. As excavations continued, researchers discovered around 100 graves in the area. Many of them showed signs of anti-vampire measures. Some bodies had triangular metal restraints placed around their legs, while others were buried with heavy objects to keep them pinned down in the ground. All of it served one purpose: to ensure the dead could not return. Notably, near the child's grave, archaeologists also found several other remains, including that of a woman who was about 6 months pregnant. These discoveries suggest that the fear was not directed at just one individual, but had spread throughout the entire community. At that time, people were especially afraid of unbaptized children or those who had drowned. They believed these souls were more likely to become vampires, creatures that would return to prey on their loved ones first, then their neighbors, and eventually the entire village. It may sound superstitious today, but if you place yourself in that era, when science was underdeveloped and diseases were poorly understood, the fear becomes much easier to comprehend. Phenomena such as bodies decomposing slowly or appearing to move after burial may have convinced people that the dead could truly come back to life. And so, these bizarre burial rituals were born as a way to protect the living from an invisible terror. So if you had lived in that time, in a village where death wasn't the end, but potentially the beginning of something horrifying, what would you have done to protect yourself? As for me, honestly, even now, just thinking about it still sends chills down my spine, and I can't come up with any way to protect myself at all. The incorrupt body of a saint for 100 years. The shocking truth behind it. Throughout history, from ancient times to the present, humanity has witnessed many so-called incorrupt bodies, remains that have lain still for hundreds, even thousands of years without decaying. It sounds mysterious, but if you look deeper, most of these cases can be clearly explained by science. Some are preserved by freezing environments, others by sophisticated embalming techniques, or by natural conditions that accidentally freeze time. But among all these logical explanations, there is one story that has left even scientists stunned, that of Bernadette Soubirous. Bernadette was born into a poor tailor's family in southern France. From a young age, she was frail and frequently ill, especially suffering from asthma, which made life difficult. Then in 1858, at just 14 years old, something happened that would change her life forever, and perhaps history as well. While gathering firewood near the Gave River, Bernadette claimed she saw the Virgin Mary appear to her in a grotto. At first, no one believed her. After all, she was just a poor, sickly girl speaking of something sacred. It sounded more like imagination than reality. But what made the story extraordinary was that it didn't stop there. Over the next 5 months, Bernadette insisted she saw the Virgin Mary 17 more times. Rumors spread quickly, and crowds began gathering at the grotto. And where there are crowds, there is doubt, pressure, even threats from authorities. What would you have done in her place? Many people might have admitted it was all a lie just to find peace, but Bernadette did not. She remained steadfast in what she claimed to have seen, despite all the pressure. Then came the moment that changed everything. Following instructions from her visions, she dug into the ground with her bare hands and uncovered a spring. Strangely, the water from that spring was later believed to have healing properties for many people. From a story once doubted, Bernadette gradually became a symbol of faith. Her reputation spread so widely that even the Empress of France intervened to allow a church to be built at the site. Years later, Bernadette entered a convent at the age of 22, living a simple and devoted life. She passed away at 35 after years of illness. At that point, most would have thought her story had quietly come to an end, but it hadn't. More than 30 years after her death in 1913, Bernadette's grave was opened, and that was when everything became difficult to explain. Those present, including doctors, were astonished. Her body was almost completely intact. There was no smell of decay. Her skin was still soft. Her face retained a peaceful expression, as if she were simply asleep. Just imagine, a body buried underground for over 3 decades, under completely ordinary conditions, yet preserved like that. Does it sound reasonable? At the time, due to war, the examination process was interrupted. It wasn't until 1919 that her grave was reopened to complete the procedures, yet the results were nearly unchanged. Despite the passage of time, her body remained in a state that left anyone who saw it deeply unsettled. What's even more remarkable is this: Bernadette was never embalmed. No preservation techniques were used. The burial environment was not special in any way. Meanwhile, other bodies buried under similar conditions decomposed naturally. So what was really happening? If we look at other cases, science can usually provide answers. Bodies preserved in ice are essentially kept in a natural freezer. Ancient mummies were treated with herbs and chemicals to prevent decay. Even self-mummified monks underwent extreme processes to dry out their bodies before death. But Bernadette fits none of these categories. There is, of course, another fascinating exception: Nanyue from China, an incredibly well-preserved mummy. However, her case is clearly explained by an elaborate preservation process involving multiple layers of fabric, chemicals, sealed coffins, and a specially controlled burial environment. Bernadette, on the other hand, had none of that. And that is why, even today, science has yet to provide a fully satisfactory explanation. Meanwhile, those with religious faith believe this is a miracle, a sign of divine grace granted to a pure soul. What's more, Bernadette is not the only case. History records many similar instances among saints, individuals who lived simple, devoted lives, and after death, their bodies seemed to defy natural laws. So what is this really? An unexplained scientific phenomenon, or something far beyond human understanding? Can you answer that? And if one day you were to witness such a body with your own eyes, undecayed, untouched by time, preserved for hundreds of years, what would you believe in? Science or a miracle? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Rare artifacts found in a 2,400-year-old tomb in China. You know, the ancient world is filled with countless mysteries and fascinating stories. Some tales may sound, at first, like nothing more than a simple case of tomb robbery, but the deeper you dig, the more they reveal secrets buried for thousands of years. And this next story begins in a very ordinary way, with a tomb robber. It all started in 2016 at a vast ancient burial complex in Xiangfen County, Shanxi Province, China. A thief quietly dug into the ground. There was no noise, no obvious trace. He simply made a small hole from one corner of the tomb, took a few artifacts, and disappeared as if he had never existed. At first glance, it seemed like just another case of artifact theft. But what he didn't realize was that his actions had unintentionally awakened a mystery that had been dormant for over 2,500 years. It wasn't until 2018 that archaeologists from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences received information and arrived at the site. At first, they may have assumed it was just a routine case of site disturbance. But once they began their investigation and analysis, everything quickly exceeded expectations. Experts determined that the looted tomb was far from ordinary. It dated back to the late spring and autumn period, around 770 to 476 BC, meaning it was more than 2,500 years old. Its size was also remarkable, about 21.3 feet long, 17.7 feet wide, and nearly 33 feet deep underground. Just hearing those dimensions, you can tell this was no ordinary burial, right? But what truly made archaeologists uneasy was its location. The tomb was part of the Taosi Archaeological Site, a massive ancient cemetery in China containing around 10,000 graves of various sizes. A place where every inch of soil could reveal a piece of history. Fortunately, the thief had only scratched the surface of the treasure inside. He took some items, but many valuable artifacts remained undiscovered. And when archaeologists began a proper excavation, what they uncovered left everyone astonished. First, there were 16 ancient bronze bells with inscriptions. Over 2,000 years ago, these bells may have rung during solemn rituals or powerful ceremonial events. In addition, a large number of ancient weapons and jade artifacts were found, items that only the nobility could possess. One of the most remarkable discoveries was an exceptionally large bronze drum base. Hollow inside and used to support a drum, it measured about 32.7 inches in diameter. With that size, it has been identified as one of the largest drum bases ever found in China. By now, you can probably imagine the status of the tomb's owner, but that wasn't all. As archaeologists moved deeper into the center of the tomb, they discovered a decayed wooden coffin. Inside were the remains of a woman in her 30s. But what shocked everyone was that inside her abdomen, there were still traces of a fetus. That trace was a skull. The small skull was still clearly recognizable. After examination and analysis, experts estimated that the fetus was about 8 months old. A life that never had the chance to be born had remained buried alongside its mother for more than 2 millennia. Truly heartbreaking, isn't it? At this point, many of you might be wondering, just like I did, who was this woman? Based on the artifacts and inscriptions found in the tomb, archaeologists identified her as the wife of Shida Fu, a noble official during the spring and autumn period. This also explains why the tomb was so large and filled with such valuable treasures. However, the reason she died while still pregnant remains a mystery to this day, one that no one has yet been able to answer with certainty. Elongated skulls like aliens, a 1,000-year-old mystery that baffles archaeologists. There are some things that, at first glance, make you rub your eyes just to be sure they're real. The skulls discovered at the ancient cemetery of Muz-Ikse Dulo in Hungary are one of those cases. At a glance, many people might think they're props from a science fiction movie. Long heads, high protruding foreheads, and strange shapes that don't resemble ordinary humans at all. But the remarkable thing is, they are completely real, and they have existed for more than 1,000 years. During excavations at this ancient burial site, archaeologists uncovered dozens of skeletons with clearly deformed skulls. These were not caused by accidents or disease. They were intentionally shaped by human hands. Hearing that, many people naturally wonder, why would anyone do something so unusual? To understand this, we have to go back to the 5th century AD. At that time, this region was part of the Roman Empire, known as Pannonia Valeria. However, this was also a period when the once powerful empire was gradually weakening, on the brink of collapse. Political instability, constant warfare, and waves of migration dramatically changed people's lives. In that context, a strange custom began to appear and spread across Central Europe: intentional cranial deformation. It may sound unsettling, but the process was actually quite systematic. From a very young age, when a child's skull was still soft, parents would use cloth, bands, or tools to tightly bind the head, forcing the skull to grow into an elongated, egg-like shape. This process lasted for years, until the head's shape was fully set. Just imagine, a child growing up with an unusually long head, looking completely different from those around them. What would that feel like? Of course, this was not a random or isolated act. Research shows that this practice was quite common in certain communities at the time. In other words, those strange skulls were not rare anomalies. They were part of a cultural tradition. So why did they do it? To this day, scientists still don't have a definitive answer. Several theories have been proposed. Some believe it was a sign of social status. The more distinctive the skull, the higher the individual's rank or power. Others suggest it was a way to express cultural identity, distinguishing different groups during a time of migration and upheaval. There are also theories that link it to spiritual beliefs or standards of beauty at the time. In a way, it's not so different from today. Some people get tattoos or cosmetic surgery. Back then, they reshaped the skull itself. It may seem strange, but when you think about it, people in every era have found their own ways to express identity and belief. Returning to the discoveries at Mos Ikse Dulu, what fascinates archaeologists is not just the shape of the skulls, but the historical context surrounding them. The 5th century marked the decline of the Roman Empire. Large-scale migrations from Asia and Eastern Europe flooded into Roman territories, bringing with them new cultures, customs, and unusual practices. It's very possible that this cultural blending gave rise to the alien-like skulls we see today. These skeletons, lying silently underground for over 1,000 years, tell more than just the story of a strange custom. They reflect an entire era of upheaval in human history. So if you had lived in that time, would you have accepted reshaping your skull just to fit into your community? Or would you have chosen to remain yourself, even if it meant being seen as different? The 500-year-old skeleton of a woman still with hair in China. You know, archaeology has always been fascinating in its own unique way. Some discoveries make people simply nod because they seem logical, but others make you pause for a few seconds and ask, how is that even possible? The story of a 500-year-old skeleton of a woman in China that still has intact hair is one of those cases. During an excavation in Jingzhou, Hubei Province, China, scientists discovered the remains of a woman who lived during the Ming Dynasty, about half a millennium ago. But what makes this discovery extraordinary is not its age, it's the condition of the remains. As we all know, after a few hundred years, the human body typically decomposes almost completely, leaving behind only bones. Hair, skin, clothing are rarely preserved intact. Yet in this case, the woman's hair was still there, as if time had somehow forgotten to touch it. So what exactly allowed this body to be preserved so well? The answer begins with how she was buried. According to archaeologists, when she died, the woman was interred using a very special burial method. Her body was covered in a thick layer of lime. It may sound simple, but lime has the ability to absorb moisture and limit bacterial growth. This inadvertently created an environment that effectively locked the decomposition process. But that wasn't all. Her coffin was also sealed extremely carefully, using a special adhesive made from glutinous rice. This natural glue acted as an airtight barrier, preventing bacteria from entering from the outside. And there's more. At the bottom of the coffin, scientists also found various herbs along with jujube fruits. These items not only held spiritual significance in burial rituals, but may have also contributed to preserving the body. Some herbs have natural antibacterial properties, helping to slow down decomposition. All of these factors combined, the lime layer, the glutinous rice sealant, and the herbs, accidentally created an incredibly effective preservation technology 500 years ago. Isn't it fascinating that people in the past, without laboratories or modern equipment, were able, through experience and traditional beliefs, to develop methods that science today still studies carefully? Currently, the woman's remains have been transferred to a laboratory and are being preserved in a low-temperature environment. Her clothing has also been sealed in vacuum bags to prevent further damage. Every detail, no matter how small, is being carefully protected. Because they are not just physical objects, they are pieces of a story from the past. Scientists also believe this discovery is highly significant. Through the remains and the accompanying artifacts, they can gain deeper insights into burial customs, clothing styles, and daily life during the Ming Dynasty in China. In other words, this is not just a set of remains, it is a time portal. From the preserved strands of hair, to the fabric of her clothing, to the herbs placed at the bottom of the coffin, everything is telling a story that history has never fully recorded. So if one day scientists are able to reconstruct her appearance, her life, or even the cause of her death, would you want to know how she lived? If you would, don't forget to follow the Ancient History channel so you won't miss the next mystery from the past. 10,000-year-old painting in the Amazon rainforest. Traces of a lost civilization. Have you ever wondered before the civilizations we know today emerged? Could humans have once built a world far more advanced than we imagine? Stories about prehistoric civilizations have long been debated. Some believe they are real, while others think they are nothing more than myths. Even Atlantis, the legendary land mentioned in the works of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, has never been proven with solid evidence. And yet, deep in the Amazon rainforest, a recent discovery has made many people rethink everything. After more than half a century of conflict, Colombia finally reached a ceasefire agreement in 2016. That rare period of peace opened the door for scientists to enter regions that had previously been almost off-limits. A team of archaeologists from the UK and Colombia began an expedition deep into the Amazon, where nature remains largely untouched. And then, they found something no one expected. In the area of Serranía la Lindosa, massive rock paintings gradually revealed themselves along cliff faces. Not just one or two, but an entire system stretching for dozens of miles, featuring thousands of ancient images. In the Cerro Azul area alone, as many as 12 large panels and countless strange symbols have been discovered. What astonished archaeologists was not only the scale, but also the content of these paintings. They depict unusual animals such as giant sloths, horses, and camels, even creatures that went extinct long ago. Some images show scenes of hunting and daily life, but if you look closely, the proportions between humans and animals are extremely unusual. Some animals appear as large as a car. Doesn't that seem a bit off? But that's not all. On the rock walls, there are also mysterious figures, half human, half animal beings, and people wearing bird-like masks. These images raise an unsettling question. Are they merely imagination, or something the artists actually witnessed? What makes the mystery even deeper is the age of these paintings. They are estimated to be around 12,000 years old, dating back to the end of the Ice Age. At that time, much of the Earth was still covered in ice, but regions near the equator like the Amazon remained warm and humid, one of the few places where humans could live more stably. But here's the puzzling part. How have these paintings survived for tens of thousands of years on exposed rock surfaces without completely fading? The type of pigment used by ancient people remains a major question. So who created these artworks? Looking at the history of Central America, many might think of the Maya civilization, one of the most brilliant ancient cultures, emerging around 2000 BC and known for its cities, temples, writing system, and complex rituals. However, there's a problem. The Amazon paintings are nearly 8,000 years older than the Maya. Such a vast time gap makes any direct connection difficult to prove. What about Atlantis? According to legend, this civilization existed around 9,000 to 10,000 years ago and was located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. At first glance, the timeline seems to match, doesn't it? But geographically, the Amazon is nearly half a world away from the supposed location of Atlantis. This makes the theory less convincing. In the end, archaeologists have proposed a more grounded explanation. The creators of these paintings were our own ancestors, humans of the species Homo sapiens, who lived and adapted to harsh environments tens of thousands of years ago. Even so, many questions remain. How were they able to create works on such a massive scale? What do those strange images really mean? And more importantly, are we underestimating the capabilities of prehistoric humans? It's hard to answer all of these questions with certainty. After all, the history we know may only be a very small part of the bigger picture, and perhaps, somewhere deep within dense forests or beneath thick layers of earth, countless secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. 150 skulls in a dark cave reveal a chilling ritual over 1,000 years old in Mexico. Have you ever imagined deep inside a pitch-black cave, far beneath the ground, filled with hundreds of human skulls? Just thinking about it is enough to send chills down your spine, right? But this is not fiction. It's a real discovery made in 2012 in Chiapas, Mexico, a place where ancient secrets still lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered. At first, when local authorities arrived at the scene, they were shocked. In front of them were around 150 human skulls scattered throughout the cave. It was a strange and terrifying sight, one that immediately made people think of a serious criminal case. Just put yourself in that situation, walking into a dark, lightless space and suddenly seeing skulls staring back at you. It definitely wouldn't feel comfortable, would it? However, the deeper the investigation went, the more surprising the truth became. Scientists later determined that these skulls were not connected to any modern crime. On the contrary, they date back over 1,000 years, specifically to the period between 900 and 1200 AD. This means these individuals died long ago, during a time when ancient cultures were still full of mysteries and complex rituals. According to research from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, most of the skulls belong to adult women, and notably, there were also 3 infants. One detail that particularly caught researchers' attention was that none of the skulls still had teeth. It may seem minor, but this detail led to a very important hypothesis. These skulls may be part of a tzompantli, also known as a skull rack, a ritual structure well known in ancient Mesoamerican cultures, especially among the Aztec. A tzompantli was not something simple. It was a wooden framework where the skulls of sacrificial victims were deliberately arranged or displayed. According to descriptions, the victims' heads were often pierced through the temples with wooden stakes and then hung in rows. Just imagining that scene is enough to leave a lasting impression. What's more, inside this cave, researchers also found traces of wooden stakes, clear evidence supporting the tzompantli hypothesis. For ancient Mesoamerican cultures, these sacrificial rituals were not merely acts of violence. They were expressions of religious belief, reverence for the gods, and sometimes a way to pray for good harvests, health, or protection. In that sense, tzompantli were not only terrifying, they were also symbols of a complex spiritual system. Even more striking, this is not the first time tzompantli have been found in the Chiapas region. Previously, caves such as Banquetas and Devil's Tepesco have revealed similar evidence. This suggests that such rituals were not isolated incidents, but may have been widespread in the region for a long time. Pretty unsettling, isn't it? 3,700-year-old ancient dagger discovered on a school playground. Recently, an 8-year-old girl accidentally discovered an ancient dagger estimated to be 3,700 years old while playing in her schoolyard in Vestland County, Western Norway. The girl, named Elise, was having what seemed like a normal day when she picked up a small grayish-brown stone with a strange shape. No one could have imagined that the object in her hand was actually a prehistoric dagger, crafted around 3,700 years ago, dating back to the Stone Age, one of the earliest periods in human history. With the curiosity and innocence of a child, Elise showed the strange rock to her teacher. Fortunately, the teacher quickly realized that the object, measuring about 4.7 inches in length, was far from ordinary. It bore clear signs of human craftsmanship and an ancient style. The teacher immediately contacted archaeologists from the Vestland County Council to examine the artifact. When experts arrived and took a closer look, they confirmed that it was indeed a dagger from the late Stone Age, specifically from the Middle to late Neolithic period. This was a time when humans began shaping stone into tools, domesticating animals, farming crops, building permanent settlements, and developing early crafts. What makes this discovery especially significant is that daggers of this type are extremely rare. In many cases, they are associated with ritual burials or sacrificial practices. The appearance of such an object in the middle of a modern schoolyard has raised many important questions among archaeologists. Given the artifact's importance, the Vestland County Council quickly collaborated with the University Museum of Bergen, located in the city of Bergen, considered Norway's second-largest cultural center, to expand investigations in the surrounding area. However, as of now, no additional archaeological evidence has been found at the site, making the dagger even more mysterious and unique. Another aspect that has drawn significant attention from researchers is the material of the dagger. Analysis revealed that it was made of flint, a very hard sedimentary rock commonly used in prehistoric times for making weapons and tools. However, flint does not naturally occur in Norway. It is far more common in regions such as Denmark. This has led to the hypothesis that the dagger may have been brought from Denmark to Norway across the North Sea, either through ancient trade networks or possibly through natural movement of materials during the Ice Age. Of course, this is not the first time flint artifacts have been found in Norway. However, this discovery is particularly meaningful because it is closely tied to patterns of migration, trade, and cultural exchange among prehistoric peoples in Northern Europe. To better understand this, we need to look at the broader picture of the Stone Age in Norway, which lasted from around 10,000 BC to 1800 BC. During this time, the earliest inhabitants mainly lived along the coast, relying on hunting, fishing, and gathering in the forests. To survive, they used tools such as spears, axes, harpoons, bows and arrows, and fishing hooks, crafted from stone, animal bones, and wood. By around 2400 BC, some hunter-gatherer groups began to settle down and transition into agriculture, marking a major turning point in ancient society. That's why the fact that a child today could accidentally discover such a valuable relic from that era, in a modern setting like a schoolyard, is not just an interesting coincidence. It may also be a powerful reminder that the past is still waiting to be uncovered right beneath our feet. Hidden treasure beneath the coast of Egypt. What would you think if I told you that beneath the murky waters off the coast of Egypt, just a few miles from shore, there lies an entire ancient city, once one of the most prosperous of its time, now resting silently on the seabed? Hard to believe, right? But this is not a legend. It's a real discovery, revealed when a team of underwater archaeologists, led by Frank Gaudio, began exploring the mysterious ruins of Thonis Herakleion, a port city that once served as a vital gateway for trade in ancient Egypt. Diving deeper into Abukir Bay, the team uncovered findings that would send chills down anyone's spine. In the southern canal area of the city, they discovered massive stone blocks, the remains of a collapsed ancient temple. What's remarkable is that this structure wasn't destroyed by war. Instead, it is believed to have been swallowed by a catastrophic flood around the mid-2nd century BC. Can you imagine it? An enormous temple, submerged in an instant by the sheer force of nature. And this was no ordinary temple. It was dedicated to Amun, the supreme god in ancient Egyptian belief. According to tradition, pharaohs would come here upon ascending the throne to receive divine power, as a sacred ritual affirming their rule. Just picture it. Once, the most powerful rulers of their time walked these grounds, and now, all that remains are scattered ruins beneath the sea. It's a haunting thought, isn't it? But that's not all. What truly excited archaeologists were the artifacts uncovered at the site. Silver ritual objects, finely crafted gold jewelry, and even perfume bottles and ointment containers, though broken, still tell the story of a once thriving and devout civilization. It's as if the ruins themselves are whispering that this place was once a wealthy and sacred center. Interestingly, just east of the temple, the team also discovered a sanctuary dedicated to Aphrodite. Here, they found numerous bronze and ceramic artifacts, clearly indicating the presence of a Greek community that once lived and traded in the city. This shows that even thousands of years ago, this location was a vibrant hub of cultural exchange. Moreover, the discovery of Greek weapons revealed another fascinating detail. Greek mercenaries once guarded this area. They protected the entrance to the kingdom along the Canopic branch of the Nile, the most important waterway for ships at the time. And there's more. Beneath layers of mud and sand, archaeologists uncovered submerged structures supported by wooden pillars and beams dating back to the 5th century BC, and astonishingly, they remain almost perfectly preserved. It's as if time itself has been frozen beneath the sea. The ruins of this city were first discovered in 2000 by the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, located about 4.3 miles off Egypt's coast. Before Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria in 331 BC, Thonis Herakleion was the largest port in Egypt on the Mediterranean Sea. But once again, nature proved its overwhelming power. Rising sea levels, repeated earthquakes, and soil liquefaction caused a vast area, about 42 square miles of the Nile Delta, to sink beneath the sea, and Thonis Herakleion could not escape that fate. It truly shows how terrifying the power of nature can be and why it's something we should never underestimate. 52 feet scroll, found inside a 2,000-year-old coffin in Egypt, in the heart of a scorching desert where towering pyramids have stood for thousands of years. A secret has just been awakened after more than 2 millennia of silence. This secret is not gold or treasure, but simply a scroll about 52 feet long, hidden inside an ancient coffin. The discovery was made at the vast burial site of Saqqara, located just south of the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the first step pyramid in Egyptian history. This area has long been known as a burial ground spanning multiple millennia, but even archaeologists likely didn't expect to find such a well-preserved map of the afterlife. The scroll contains excerpts from the Book of the Dead. Just hearing the name sounds mysterious, doesn't it? But for ancient Egyptians, this was not something frightening. On the contrary, it was more like a guidebook to help the soul safely navigate the afterlife. Think of it this way. If the journey after death is a long and challenging trip, then this scroll is the map, with detailed instructions. It includes spells, prayers, and guidance to help the soul avoid dangers, pass judgment by the gods, and ultimately find peace. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is its level of preservation. According to Mustafa Waziri, this is the first complete scroll found in Saqqara in over 100 years. That means for an entire century, no similar discovery has been recorded in this area. The coffin containing the scroll dates from around 712 BC to 332 BC, making it more than 2,000 years old. According to Zahi Hawass, information about the scroll's owner is still being studied and will be announced soon. A guide to the afterlife. Stretching 52 feet, pretty fascinating, right? But even that's not a record. According to researcher Foy Scalf, some versions of the Book of the Dead have been found measuring over 98 feet in length. This shows just how much effort and belief the ancient Egyptians invested in the journey after death. Looking back at Saqqara, this site is not only associated with Pharaoh Djoser's pyramid, but also served as a cemetery used continuously across many historical periods. That's why finding coffins, tombs, and artifacts from different eras is not surprising. Yet each new discovery feels like opening another untold chapter of history. In fact, this is not the first time such scrolls have been found here. In 2022, archaeologists also discovered a scroll about 13 feet long near the Pyramid of Teti. It even bore the name of its owner, a man called Pukayif. Although he was buried near a royal pyramid, he actually lived centuries after that pharaoh. This suggests that burial near royal structures was once a common practice. So imagine this, if one day you found a guidebook for the afterlife, like this, would you dare to open it and read? As for me, honestly, I would probably leave it exactly as it is, just as it has remained for thousands of years. Because those ancient lines of text may not be just history, they might be whispers from a world that we, as modern humans, have never truly understood. The Bosnia Pyramid, the oldest pyramid in the world? When it comes to ancient wonders, you probably think of the pyramids of Giza in Egypt, a mysterious and magnificent symbol of an ancient civilization. But did you know there is another pyramid, far less known, that has been shaking the global scientific community? It's known as the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, a structure hidden beneath layers of soil and vegetation in the town of Visoko. For many years, local residents believed it was just an ordinary hill, casually calling it Visoko Hill. It wasn't until 2005 that a surprising discovery revealed the truth. This hill appeared to be a pyramid-like structure, possibly built by an ancient civilization, perhaps even the oldest civilization humanity has ever known. Then, in 2012, two Italian archaeologists, Riccardo Brett and Niccolo Visconti, stunned the world when they discovered a piece of organic material deep within the pyramid structure. After radiocarbon analysis, the results suggested the material was about 25,000 years old. Just imagine, that's roughly 13,000 years before the rise of the Sumer and Babylon, civilizations long considered the cradle of human history. This finding doesn't just raise questions, it has the potential to completely overturn what we thought we knew about humanity's past. When the Bosnian pyramid was first discovered, researchers could only date the outer soil layer, which came in at around 12,000 years old. That alone was shocking. But the 25,000-year figure for material found inside pushes this mystery to an entirely different level. Could it be that an advanced, intelligent civilization once existed, perhaps even more advanced than we are today, only to be wiped out by an unrecorded catastrophe? However, like many groundbreaking discoveries, the Bosnian pyramid has also faced significant skepticism. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who spent 10 days studying the site, argues that it is simply a natural geological formation, not a man-made structure. Supporting this view, archaeologist Paul Heinrich from Louisiana State University stated that such landforms are quite common. In the United States, they are known as flatirons, iron-shaped geological formations frequently found in the western regions. This divide within the scientific community has made the Bosnian pyramid one of the greatest mysteries of the 21st century. Is it truly a remnant of a lost civilization, or simply a grand misunderstanding shaped by nature? We are still searching for the answer, but one thing is certain: the Bosnian pyramid has sparked curiosity, fueled the desire for discovery, and challenged everything we thought we knew about humanity's past. As you can see, the ancient world is filled with mysteries. Some have been buried for thousands of years and eventually found their answers, while others remain hidden in the shadows to this day, leaving archaeologists struggling to understand them. So among all the mysteries we've explored, which one do you think is the most puzzling? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give ancient history a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our latest videos. And for now, goodbye, and see you next time.